And then repeat after me. I state your name. Do affirm under penalties of perjury that I will faithfully perform those duties assigned to me as a police officer for the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland. That I will uphold the Constitution of the United States and of the State of Maryland. That I will obey the commands of my superiors and abide by all the rules, policies, and procedures of the Police Department. That without prejudice or partiality, I will perform my duties and enforce all laws within the City of Tacoma Park and as I may otherwise have jurisdiction. And that I hereby acknowledge and accept this appointment as a public trust requiring honesty and diligence. Well, congratulations. Now, if we could have your family members come up here and put your badges on. And workers' comp. For a photo. We'll have a photo, chief and everyone. Okay, that's just like that? Straight ahead? Got it. Well, we're delighted to have both of you on our board. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very delighted to meet you. Thank you. And you also. Who's the little one here? Ah, what's your name? Andrew? I see. Well, it's a lot of people around that he doesn't know. So we're delighted to have you all, and congratulations and welcome to the department. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start signing. One more responsibility, and that's that you have to sign this oath of office. Because your name on it. And what you I'm just signing this one. Check. Officer Robinson, there you go. You can have a swap. Regular's mine. Ah, okay. Yes, it does look like that. I think this is supposed to come here first. You're exactly right. That is what's supposed to happen. We'll put you in charge of this. Yeah, actually, that's a good sign. You should only sign where your name is. Okay. We're going to give you one copy and one copy from the same department. Yeah. Sign this. And then this
one. Okay, there you are. And then the chief also has to sign it, and that's all official.
I did that when I got
You can sign for everybody else's too, thank you. This chief has to sign it, and make it official.
Let me see that thing. Yeah, okay, you're official now. Can't get out of it.
I'm very pleased to do it. It's one of my favorite duties.
This is what you were talking about, but you need to get one that's sound. Yeah, okay. Like on the.
Hope to have it 2 weeks to report to the council. We'll have full strength.
Yeah, it's my first one.
Right as soon as that.
This one.
All right.
You take charge of those and then
Take care.
do the proper things.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thanks for getting us in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome you here.
Looks like a virtual family.
here. Will the clerk please call the roll? I'm here.
Councilmember Austin Lane. Councilmember Barry. Councilmember Clay.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember Smithers. Councilmember Williams.
Here.
We have a quorum of the council, so we can proceed. The first item on the agenda is council comments or announcements, and I'd like to begin with a couple of things. The first one is to remind everyone that we will not have a city council meeting next Monday. Next Monday evening is the first evening of Passover, and so we won't have a city council meeting. We will have one again the following Monday, and we will resume our regular Monday evening council meetings at that point. The second thing I wanted to do was to note the death last week of Judge Leonard Rubin. Judge Rubin was a retired judge of the circuit court. He was also the husband of our state senator, former state senator Ida Rubin. I had the opportunity to get to know Judge Rubin when I worked with Senator Rubin on the campaign last fall, and he was an absolutely delightful person. He had a wonderful sense of humor. He came to one of our early events with the senator, and I went to speak to him as he was standing next to the refreshment table, and I welcomed him and told him how glad we were to have him. And he looked at me with this completely serious look on his face and said, "I only came for the cookies." So he was a wonderful advisor to the senator and her most trusted confidant, and he gave her excellent political advice. They were one of the best-known political couples in Montgomery County, and in many ways I think he was ahead of his time, just as Senator Rubin was ahead of her time in being a very strong female leader when many women didn't have that opportunity. Judge Rubin was ahead of his time in being a very supportive husband. He was a man of great accomplishment, but also completely supportive of Senator Rubin's career also. They had been married 58 years at the time that he died, and we're sorry to lose him. He had come to a number of Tacoma Park events, and I know many of us in the city had gotten to know him, and so we mourn his passing and offer our sympathies to his family. Are there any other council comments or announcements? Yes.
Welcome, everybody. I want to remind everyone that tomorrow night at the New Hampshire Avenue Center is the master plan meeting for the area where Sligo Creek and New Hampshire connect up, and that's been out on the email list for the various groups. And so, if you're interested in that, I encourage you to attend. The other thing is that we were going to have a meeting on the Jackson Boyd park planning on Thursday. That's been postponed for 3 weeks. We never actually sent the invitations out, but we did make a note of it in the planning in the listservs, and so I wanted to let people know in case they hadn't gotten the message that that's not happening for another 3 weeks. And then I had made a request, I guess on Friday after Barb left, for a copy of the employee handbook and the just the personnel policies. Oh, okay. I haven't gotten a response. Great. Well, thanks, and welcome, everybody.
Any other announcements or comments? All right. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. We have in front of us just the minutes of March 5th. I assume people have had a chance to read them. The city clerk sent them out by email earlier today. And if everyone has had a chance to take a look at them, would someone like to move adoption of the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Yes, Terry?
I had one correction on page 3, the second paragraph. It says Diane Berkeley, Ward 4 resident, commented on problems related to receiving disability benefits or disability payments, and I believe that her comment was regarding Social Security widow benefits.
Okay, maybe we could just say Social Security. Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. All those in favor of adopting the minutes, as I assume is modified by Councilmember Siemens, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are adopted. Next item on the agenda is public comment period, and I'd like to do something a little bit different this evening. We have a very special group of young activists with us this evening. They are students from Piney Branch Elementary and Tacoma Park Middle School who wanted to come and speak to the council about something that's very important to them. And I'd like at the very beginning of our public comment period to give them an opportunity to speak to us. Why don't you each come up? You see the podium with the microphone right up there? If each of you could come up to the podium and speak to the council. That's right. Take the microphone and move it so that you can use it. There you go. That's exactly right.
Hi, my name is Javier Lopez, and our club represents Piney Branch Elementary School, and we try to stop global warming. Global warming is a major problem for the Earth. We have a petition for you to sign about global warming. Please sign it, and we will take to Congress.
That's all right. You can just hold it if you want to. That might be easier for you, and then just pass it to the...
Carbon dioxide causes global warming. Humans produce 22 tons of carbon dioxide every year by driving, using air conditioning and heating, flying in airplanes, and watching TV and using a computer. And my name is Jetney Carr.
My name is Haki Johnson, and global warming is melting the polar ice caps. If they melt, the sea levels will rise, like New York and Fiji could end up underwater. If warming continues, we will have more tornadoes, hurricanes. There could be droughts and more deserts if we don't stop global warming.
We need to find ways to reduce carbon dioxide. One of the ways is to ban polystyrene food packaging. Speaking polystyrene uses more energy and gives off more greenhouse gases than any other material except aluminum. Every day, my school uses polystyrene on strays. This is a huge waste. In fact, 55,000 lunch trays are burned in the Montgomery County Waste Incinerator every day, contributing to air pollution and greenhouse gases. I have a solution. Do what many other cities have done. Ban polystyrene food packaging and trays. I have a copy of laws for you to consider. We also need to find ways to absorb carbon dioxide. I have a solution for this problem, too. One tree can absorb 1 ton of carbon dioxide in 20 years. If we plant trees, we can store some of the carbon dioxide we produce. I'm Heather DeMacher.
I'm Ben Miller, and if you live to be 90, you would have to plant almost 2,500 trees to offset your carbon footprint, which is how much carbon dioxide you produce. That's more trees than we have room for, so we should also need to find ways to reduce our use of things that produce carbon dioxide. If we don't produce so much carbon dioxide, we can help stop global warming.
We need to use solar panels and wind-powered instead of fossil fuels. We need to use fluorescent light bulbs instead of incandescent light bulbs. We need to walk or bicycle instead of using a car. My name is Dylan Goldville.
My name is Liza Curcio, and the Young Activist Club is trying to collect signatures on a petition to take to Congress. We want them to know that kids are worried about global warming. We also want to ask the City Council to do something to stop global warming, like planting more trees around the community center or in city parks. Can you help? Thank you.
Hi, this is Espa Escudero Loaiza. I'm Eric Spawn's daughter. Hi, I'm Casey Goldvale. We are here to talk to you about global warming. We ask that you help end global warming. We know we have to act soon. Here are things we can do to help end global warming. We can drive smaller cars and hybrid cars instead of SUVs. SUVs produce more carbon dioxide, and we want to get less of that. We have to plant more trees so we can, because the trees breathe in carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen, which will help improve our environment. And we can switch to from incandescent light bulbs to fluorescent light bulbs, and we can use solar and wind power instead of fossil fuels.
Yeah, and the city can make some of these things happen. You can change things in Tacoma Park. For example, we had some ideas. To get people to drive hybrid cars, we can dedicate the best parking spaces at the community center for hybrid cars. And we could also have certain days or times when people driving hybrid cars don't have to put money in parking meters to encourage them to use their hybrid cars around Tacoma Park. You can also plant more trees around Tacoma Park in front of the community center and in many of the city's parks. Students from Piney Branch Elementary and Tacoma Park Middle School would be willing to help raise money to plant trees, and we'd also be willing to help plant them. The community center already has fluorescent lighting, which is great, but many homes in Tacoma Park don't have fluorescent bulbs. They are really expensive to buy, but save a lot of money and pollution over the long run. Maybe the city could arrange to sell them in the community center or find some way to get discounts for citizens at local stores. And many people don't know that we can buy wind power through Pepco. Maybe the city can help get the word out about that. Thanks.
Well, thank you all very much. Let's give them a round of applause.
We have one more thing to ask you.
Yes.
We have this petition that we...
I would be delighted to sign the petition, and I'm sure the other members of the council would be happy to do that also.
Would you like to read the petition to us? You need the microphone, I'm sorry.
Sure. It says, the Young Activists Club of Piney Branch Elementary School, Tacoma Park, Maryland. I want to stop global warming. We can stop global warming if we plant more trees, drive smaller cars and hybrid cars, use solar and wind power, and use fluorescent light bulbs instead of incandescent light bulbs.
Those are great ideas. We very much appreciate them and be happy to sign those. I think it's wonderful that you all are doing that, and we really appreciate your coming to us and getting active on those issues. You know, the world that you all grow up in is going to depend to a large extent on what gets done right now. And so that's a very important issue, and I'm very glad to have you here talking about it. And I hope that the Congress listens to you and makes some of the changes that you suggest. Actually, we've got a couple of things on our agenda this evening. One of them, similar to that, one of them is I'm asking the Council for authorization to sign the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. We're going to recognize Arbor Day, and we also have a report coming up later from the city arborist talking about the number of trees that the city is planting and what's happening to the health of our urban forest in Tacoma Park, all of which are very important to global warming. So this is exactly the right time to come, and we very much appreciate your coming. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at public comment period?
Yes. My name is Pat Loveless, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park. One thing I would love to do is congratulate and show that I'm very proud of the Young Activist Club, because I would love to see more and more activism in Tacoma Park, and maybe they can tell their other friends to come on over to city council meetings and start learning about their government and help them learn how to participate. Second thing, again, concerning the schools, I'd like to see what we can do to keep the recruiters, military recruiters, out of our schools. The schools are meant to be for education and preserving life and liberty only. It's not meant to be putting a rifle in a kid's hands later on when he graduates. It's not meant to be to destroy life. I look at the recruiting because of the war we got now and because we're about to go into Iran, I look at the recruiting going into the schools just like pushing drugs. It's no different. It's just another form of destroying the kids' minds in their value of life. Please, whatever we can do to kick the recruiters out of our classrooms and let them study their algebra, their math, their science, and their social studies, and become good students, not killers overseas. Another thing I want to do is invite people to come down on May the 9th, on the morning, when they're doing the Easter egg roll. We're going to be having a demonstration down there showing how dangerous those cluster bombs are over in the Middle East that Lockheed Martin has been building. We're going to have what they call a cluster bomb roll. It's going to bring attention to it is exactly what's been going on over in the Middle East, how it's affecting the children over there. It's going to be May the 9th in the morning, probably about 8 o'clock we'll be gathering, the same time they do the Easter egg roll. And I'll be down there, and I'd like to invite anybody who can come down. Anyone can come down, man, woman, or child. Anyone can come down, young and old. We want us all down there to help stand up for life, stand up for what Tacoma Park stands for, stand up for peace. Stand up for, if you believe in this flag, stand up for it. That does not mean carrying a gun into war. You don't need to be carrying a rifle to stand up and fight for your country. There are many ways you can do it. You can fight racism. You can fight global warming. You can fight greed. You can fight drugs. You can fight the war by not participating in that war. I'd like to invite everybody to come down May the 9th and join us down there for the cluster bomb roll. It's going to be at Lafayette Park in front of the White House. And anybody can come down. We want everybody down there. You too, City Council. And also, let's do whatever we can. I got some friends tonight speaking at the school board to try and stop the ROTCs and the military recruiters and get them out of our classrooms. Stop polluting the kids' minds. Today, when I heard these activisms, I cannot imagine the thought of having them being recruited for warfare. Let's not allow it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's Tacoma Park stand up what Tacoma Park is. Peace and justice.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Another thing we can try to do to stop global warming is to maybe try to lower the prices of hybrid cars in Tacoma Park. And try to get people to use the veggie oils, not the ones that you get from the ground.
Yes, those are good ideas. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
About the light bulbs, well, maybe we could lower the taxes in Tacoma Park so people would get to use the better light bulbs so it could work out fine.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd just like to say that I totally appreciate hearing from all of you, and I believe in everything that you'd said. So my issue is slightly different, but it's connected. So thanks for looking at the big picture, and I'm going to actually look at a smaller picture. 7603 Wildwood, so in Mr. Berry's ward. Just expressing concern in a general sense for the character of the neighborhood with having commercial vehicles parked on makeshift driveways in between houses, large vehicles. I had an experience that I didn't expect this winter when I had a neighbor move in and basically poured gravel about 30 feet by 12 feet in between our houses after removing everything green in between the houses. It's his property. He has the right to do that. But then a vehicle that is definitely a commercial vehicle, he starts up every morning and comes in late at night. I don't think exceeds at 19 feet, but it does bring concerns. One, the gravel nature of the semi-driveway. Basically, in the springtime, there's a lot of runoff. There's a lot of rain, so there's mud going down into the stormwater drainage. Also, just the nature and kind of aesthetics of the overall neighborhood. There's a lot of those vehicles in the neighborhood right now, and so I just want to express that concern to the council. I have an understanding that there's not much within the laws that I can do, but I did want to express the concern that this is going on, and it doesn't necessarily bode well for the neighborhood and preserving the character of that.
Okay. Can I ask the adults also to identify themselves?
Sure. My name is Hallie Yeti.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Cheryl Brew, 1113 Jackson Avenue, and I'm here for the same reason Hallie was. I'd like to urge the council to really think about this during their work session. What can we do to clarify this code, make it enforceable, make it so that the character of our neighborhoods are preserved. I don't think that commercial vehicles should be limited to just the 19-foot length. I think that we have quite a few commercial vehicles in the neighborhood that are disruptive. They block our view at corners. It does pose a safety issue, poses a loitering issue in the mornings and in the evenings. There are a lot of things to think about, and I would really urge the council to consider clarifying this so that the code can be enforced or perhaps even strengthened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Sillett. I live in 1100 block of Jackson Avenue, 1108. Also wanted to speak about the commercial vehicle issue. Just in our block, I believe there are 5 vehicles. One house in particular, there's 3 white vans full of ladders. I know that all the people that drive those vehicles don't live in the house. I recognize that there's a lot of folks that work and have commercial vehicles for painting and plumbing, and they park it in front of their house because they don't have a shop where they work. They don't have a commercial building where they keep their vehicle. But there's more vehicles than that are parked, at least in our neighborhood, and it is an issue. The streets become crowded. As Cheryl said, you get people loitering around mornings and evenings. It just makes for a much more crowded, less pleasing environment at a minimum. I think it affects property values when you have commercial vehicles pulled up in yards, when people are covering their grass, paving it over to park work trucks. I would like to see the council do something in terms of some kind of regulation for those vehicles. I think there needs to be limits on it, because in the 4 years that I've lived in my neighborhood, the number of vehicles has been steadily increasing. It'd be great to see something done to restrict that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Well, if not, thank you all very much for coming, and we very much appreciate it. The next thing on the agenda is the update from the city manager.
Just a short announcement this evening. Effective on April 2nd, Monday, new hours will go into effect for passport processing. They'll be Mondays through Thursday from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., and Wednesdays those hours will be extended to 4 p.m. This is done because of the crowded conditions of the lobby area from the school children. That's all I have.
Any questions for the acting city manager? Okay, next item on the agenda is interview for the Board of Elections. Ann Sargent and Bevlyn Washington. Ann is here. Is Bevlyn here? Yes? Okay. If you both want to come up to the table, have a seat.
Are these microphones?
Yes.
Just curious. Thank you.
Yes. They should pick you up just fine.
Okay.
Welcome both of you, and thank you for applying, and you can take it from there.
Well, apologies. I had to go and thank the students personally for coming. Love talking to the kids. We have a couple people. You all have come up and you're applying for the Board of Elections. I wonder if each of you could tell us about your previous experience with elections and why you'd be interested in serving on the Board of Elections. Maybe we could start with Ms. Sargent.
I don't know exactly how long I've been serving on the Montgomery County as a Montgomery County election judge. I can't remember, and I asked them, and their records don't go all that far back. So several elections, at least 4 with the county and 1 with the city of Tacoma Park. And I got unexpectedly promoted in the last year for the general, and then for the for the primary, and then for the general, to be chief judge. So I have to know how to do it all, which I mostly do. And I don't know. I have been doing it. I guess that would be my qualification.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Ms. Washington?
Yes. I've been an election judge with Montgomery County since 2004. I did the primary as well as the general election. I've worked as an election judge with Tacoma Park for 2 elections. I did the instant runoff, which was interesting and a nice change. I really like the process. I'm interested. I'm a voting unit judge, and I really like that because I work directly with the voters and in educating them towards the process of the actual voting. And I do also encourage my neighbors to vote. I live around a lot of apartment buildings. I live in a townhouse on Roanoke Avenue. But I do encourage people to vote, and I see that as one of the functions as a board member, as well as setting some policies and rules.
Okay, well, I appreciate that very much. I know from what you said and from the materials you gave us that both of you do have a fair amount of experience, and I think that experience would be very valuable to us as we set up the election board and give the board more power over Tacoma Park elections. So that would be, I think, extremely helpful. Are there comments or questions from other members of the council? Yes, please.
Just a comment to make sure that you all realize that we haven't had a Board of Elections before, and that it kind of puts you in a position of using the experience that you've already got to help us make sure that we're running the best elections we can, and also to give a hand to the city clerk, who's been, I think, pretty much doing it with the help of her staff. But we felt it would be a very good idea to have a Board of Elections and have citizens involved in making sure that the elections are well run and run smoothly. So I want to thank you both.
As someone who benefited mightily from the special election we just had in January, because it was extremely well run, I found that although it was pretty complicated for the voters, what I heard back was that it went really, really well, and I think this is that you two bring a lot of experience, and this will allow the city, I think, to go beyond just the elections to more voter registration, which I think is still a big issue even in Tacoma Park. And I hope that as a committee you'll come up with some ideas for how we might increase voter registration. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I just wanted to follow up on what Councilmember Williams had said, and he pointed out that this is a new board for the city, and that brings with it not just opportunity but also responsibility and maybe some vulnerability. So I'm really glad to see you're coming on board with as much experience as you have. I think it increases my feeling that we're going to be successful with it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, we very much appreciate your volunteering.
I have a question,
yes.
actually. I don't have any idea, maybe you don't either, but I don't have any idea how frequent the meetings will be or how many people will be involved, or just some little, like, can I actually do this information?
Actually, the board would be primarily advising the city clerk. Do you have an idea of how to answer that question?
Could be meeting weekly.
Don't scare up your candidate.
It'll be up to the board. My guess is that you'll want to meet at least monthly between now and the election. That's my guess.
Okay.
And then after that, I'm guessing it would be less than monthly. That you may decide, the board may decide it wants to meet quarterly, or maybe have a subcommittee do some special work, that sort of thing. It'll really be up to the board to design how it wants to function.
And do you have an idea of how many people you're hoping for?
5 to 7.
5 to 7. Okay, thanks.
Do either of you have any other questions? Well, we very much appreciate your volunteering, and I'm particularly appreciative that people with so much experience as you both have are willing to do this. So thank you very much. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
We also have an applicant for the Council Compensation Committee, Ms. Robinson Berkeley. And you have volunteered for the Council Compensation Committee. Do you want to just say a little bit about your background and why you're interested in the committee?
Okay, I moved to Tacoma Park last year in March. And since then, I've been active with Mr. Seaman and his wife and things that they're doing for the community. And I enjoy working with the community, trying to improve the city. And I think I would be good in with the applications. I think I would be good. I'm nervous, so yeah.
It's okay. Well, we appreciate your coming forward and volunteering. I'm particularly appreciative that we have 2 members from Ward 4, because sometimes it's been difficult to get people from Ward 4 to participate in council committees, and so I'm very appreciative that people are doing that. And I know that Councilmember Siemens has gotten a lot of people in Ward 4 involved in various things, including the Tacoma Park Community Action Group. And I know that you participate in that also.
Yes, I do. Not the least of which is Mr. Lovelace coming to the meetings each week.
Yes, yes, indeed. So appreciate your volunteering. Do the other members of the council have comments or questions?
I would just like to thank Ms. Berkeley for stepping forward and coming. I've appreciated the help that you give us all the time in the neighborhood, but I'm really glad to see you stepping forward for this committee and volunteering. I think it's a great opportunity for you to participate at the citywide level, but yet without having to make a long-term commitment until you see what it's like, because it is going to be a short-lived committee.
Anything I can do to help, I do it.
Thank you.
Well, we very much
I think I would
appreciate
enjoy working with the council members and everything.
Well, we very much appreciate that. Thank you for volunteering.
All right,
We
thank
appreciate
you.
it. We're actually going to do the appointments this evening. The next item on the agenda is a resolution designating Arbor Day. It designates Saturday, April 14th as Arbor Day, and talks about the Tacoma Park celebration at the Tacoma Park Library from 10 to 2 on Arbor Day, which would include, I assume, the same kinds of events as we normally have. Are you here to talk about, well, who's here to talk about Arbor Day? Okay.
You'll be hearing, this is Daryl Braithwaite, you'll be hearing from Todd later in the afternoon or evening about the annual report from the arborist. But this is the city's annual event, coordination of many different environmental groups with an interest in trees and tree preservation. Todd will be convening the usual cast of characters, Committee on the Environment, the Hort Club, as well as numerous other organizations that are involved in tree issues and tree preservation issues. We'll be doing the usual seedling giveaway. We get tree seedlings, many different kinds, from the state nursery and make them available for people to adopt and plant in their own yards. We'll also have some general information available about what those trees will turn into, ways to preserve and protect the tree canopy that's in people's yards, and things they can do in their own homes. So there'll be a lot of information available to people on these issues on that day. Hopefully the weather will be nice. We'll have it right outside the library as usual. If we have a rain day, we'll bring it into the lobby of the municipal building.
Okay. Would someone like to move the resolution?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any council comments on the Arbor Day resolution? Are there any public comments on the resolution? All right. Did you have a public comment?
I'd like to also support the resolution for Arbor Day because we all know the more, like the kid said, the activist said today, that's one way to fight global warming. 2,500 trees each person in his lifetime is required to reuptake that carbon dioxide. So I think that, it's a great resolution in respect to what is happening today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. If not, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution passes. The next item is a resolution authorizing me to sign the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. This is something that a number of mayors have signed to endorse climate protection and to make agreements and to agree that they will continue to work toward the reduction of greenhouse gases. When it came to my attention, I referred it, I believe, I think some of the staff have taken a look at it, and I referred it to the Committee on the Environment, and they've recommended that I do sign it, so it's now before the Council for that authorization.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any additional comments? Bruce and then...
Yeah, I would just say that in looking at the various points made in this, that I felt very comfortable with the fact that we've made a lot of progress on most of these. I would say the one that caught my eye that we need to probably do a better job with is number 7, that talks about practice and promote sustainable building practices using Green Building Council's LEED program or similar system. I know that it was hard given all of the various pressures in upgrading this building. I think all of us are probably wish we had been able to do more, and I think that we just have to really recognize how important it is to make sure that any renovations to buildings or any buildings that we do are as sustainable as possible in the long term, and that we lead by example there as we try and make sure that other people who are building in the community do the same.
Well, I had a question and a comment. I think I would agree with Bruce that we're doing a lot of the things that are here. But one of the questions is part of the commitment is to reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions by 7% below the 1990 levels by 2012. And I was wondering if we know what our 1990 levels were, and are we actively doing any measuring and evaluation? And it's a commitment that we're making, and for it to be a real commitment, we kind of need to be able to answer that question, I think.
Well, actually, the chair of the Committee on the Environment just walked in at the appropriate time. The question is, do we have a way of concretely measuring the carbon emissions from the city and measuring changes over time?
Well, when we did our action plan in the late 90s, it was like pulling teeth to get the data from Pepco and the other energy companies on what the energy usage was. And we're talking about trying to update that inventory again. And what's the best way of going about it? Because there's some efforts to do the same sort of thing in Montgomery County, and we may be collaborating with that effort. I know that the county just recently hired an energy efficiency expert from EPA, who was a contractor to EPA and is very good, and I know that they're doing a lot of efforts. So we're sort of looking at all of the options and don't quite have the answer for you yet.
But if I could just add that there was a group that met for a year and a half, I think, maybe 2 years in trying to put our action plan together. We had a grant. We went through a lot of steps with the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives in putting together a plan, and there was a lot of effort to come up with those measurements. We were more successful in some areas than others because of some of the difficulties that Catherine talked about, but we did quantify things.
Great. Some of the strategies that we had put forward, there was a group, a task force that had met after we did our plan to try to look into the Municipal Energy Authority. And we ran into some problems with that, with the Public Service Commission didn't want to allow us to do that. So that's why I think we're trying to look at some of these things about having aggregation, municipal aggregation of electric power, trying to look at other things. And some of the things that we had in there as strategies, I think we could go forward and do. One of them was to plant trees in the middle of New Hampshire Avenue. That would require collaborating with the State Highway Authority to say that they would allow us to do that and maintain those trees. But there was a number of steps that we could do, and our committee would like to move forward with some of them. At our last meeting, we met with David Hawk of the local Sierra Club in Montgomery County, and they're interested in looking at some climate change activities too, so we may be talking about doing some collaboration.
Okay. One of the things, if I could just add to that, one of the things that we had, one of the recommendations that the young activists made to us earlier was about publicizing opportunities for people to use more green power. And that is something I know that you all have done, and we could, it's been a while since we did anything specifically on that, and we certainly could do that again on an ongoing basis. Julie.
Just a couple of things on this. I'm very pleased to see that that this has advanced to the council's agenda. It's been talked about for several years. There are a couple of things that I'd like to emphasize. One is, as the council considers adding on to the community center, we did not take every opportunity to use green principles in the construction of this building, but there is another opportunity, which is completing the building and possibly adding a gym to it, and I hope that that the council succeeds this time in incorporating green principles into that construction. The second thing is the Center for the New American Dream is a terrific resource, great organization that's homegrown in Tacoma Park. They do office audits and would be more than happy to advise the city manager on how to improve our office systems so that they use less materials and were more sustainable. And I would very much appreciate that as part of this commitment, we invite them in to do that kind of audit. I've spoken with them. They are willing to do that. They are expert in that area. And I hope that we can really show our commitment to this agreement by not only signing it, but also implementing some of the goals in our own practices. And then finally, one of the things I notice is decreasing the size of the city's fleet. I'm very pleased that the police chief is talking about the bike patrol, and hopefully within, I believe it's about 4 weeks now, we will see that bike patrol on our streets, and possibly down the road it could have an effect on the number of vehicles in our fleet. But in the short term, it would really have, in my view, it would be expressing the will of the people, not only that they see more police visible, but also that they're green-powered police. And I'm very supportive of the police chief doing that, and hope that he can see it through to fruition in the next month. Any other comments?
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I just wanted to ask if, upon an affirmative vote on this resolution, if the city clerk could send a copy to the young activists at Piney Branch Elementary School, because I'm sure they'll be interested in this.
And I was actually going to make the comment that I noticed that the last item on the list is help educate the public schools, other jurisdictions, professional associations, so forth. I think we have a wonderful source of information in the young activists and also many other activists within the city. It's less a question of us educating people on the importance of it as it is us letting people know how they can implement their already existing concerns. So we have a great jump ahead of some other communities, and I think there's already a real interest in Tacoma Park in reducing greenhouse gases and saving energy. So we're in a good position. Any other council comments or questions? Ruben, were you raising your hand? No. Okay. Are there any public comments? Would you like to say anything else, Catherine?
Well, I could just add that some of the things that Tacoma Park has done already, and I think we've had a great asset in having Daryl in the Department of Public Works because she was a leader in getting us to use 20% biodiesel, which we've been using for years, and other cities think that's a complete innovation, and it's just routine over at our Public Works Department. And I think Daryl was also quite instrumental in getting the county to adopt the Green Power initiative. And so she's been a little bit of a quiet motivator on a number of things over the years. So.
Well, thank you. And I also would like to thank the Committee on the Environment for assisting us and recommending a number of good things for the city to do, too. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Are there any public comments on this?
Yes. As far as the young activists are concerned, Young Activist Club, what if the city council could sponsor them to speak at other schools, in other city events around Tacoma Park? Maybe, we have have a special place in the 4th of July parade for them. And maybe encourage them to get other schools active. And we can, it'd be great, because they really impressed me tonight. And it looks like they impressed you too. And also, there's a copy of the petition going around. I'd like to sign it.
Okay. Did they take the petition with them? Do you know?
I believe.
Well, we could probably ask them for some additional copies and make them available for other people if they wanted to sign. I think that's a good idea.
And thank you very much. And also, it would be great if we could encourage them to speak throughout the city. Maybe do a cable show on them. They really impressed me very much.
Yes, I thought they were very impressive. They also don't look like they need much encouragement. They seem to be very enthusiastic about it.
I know. They can encourage others, other classmates, and other people throughout the city.
Yes, I think they could definitely do that. Thank you.
I'm really proud of them.
Are there any other comments on the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement? All right. If there's none, the resolution has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution passes. The next item on the agenda is the second reading of the ordinance authorizing the 2007 pay plan. We did talk about this. The Assistant City Manager gave us a briefing on this the last time. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay.
What it is.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for second reading. Are there any council comments or questions? Are there any public comments at the second reading? All right, seeing none, since this is a second reading, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Wright? Aye. Councilmember Barry?
Aye.
Councilmember Clay?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember Sniffer?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
The ordinance passes its second reading. The final item on our regular meeting agenda is the resolution providing for appointments to the 2007 Council Compensation Committee. Would someone like to move it with the addition of Diane Berkeley's name?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any council comments? This is the 8 people that the council has interviewed for this committee are listed on this resolution. Are there any council comments or questions? Are there any public comments on the resolution? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution passes. And I see that Ms. Berkeley is still in the audience, and she's now been appointed as a member of the Council Compensation Committee. You're now officially on the committee. We are going to take a short break and come back for the items on our work session discussion. arborist report, and I think that the council will probably need to move down into the first row of chairs, because I think it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation. Then we're going to get another PowerPoint presentation on the street renovation. Carol? Yes. Okay, so the council will be, probably will be down there for the presentation, then if we need to discuss it, we'll have to move back to the microphone.
So we'll play musical chairs.
We'll play musical chairs. It'll be our exercise. Is it okay for the camera to be able to see it? Are we okay with the lights behind us?
Yeah, maybe if we can't see it, I'll tell you what's happening.
Okay.
So we've all got the report. Put up like that. Hello. This is really, there's not, what this, is it working? Yes. This is really to try and give a visual representation of the numbers that are in the report. There's really not that much information except as a representation. Because I think we can all read numbers forever and ever, and unless we're talking dollars, we don't see what it says. What I tried to do here is only a certain part of the city is really forested, and we don't have that delineated at this point, or has a canopy over it. So what I did is I selected down on lot size until these are all the lots that are 3/4 of an acre and smaller that are left in the city. You can see where Sligo Creek goes down to the right, the hospital's there in the middle. School up on the top left along Piney Branch. We're somewhere there in the middle right now. To try and represent how much canopy there is in the city, and this is actually probably twice as much tree cover as there is actual tree cover in the city. But it's the best I could do at this point. Read page down. So then, it's hard to see a little bit of this light. I guess I'll end up sending out printing copies of this later. In 2005, there were 209 trees removed on private property with permits that were undesirable species such as mulberries or alien invasive species, dead, dying, or hazardous. The data is not really totally complete on what sizes they are, so I created a range that gave me an average of 20 inches diameter breast height, which is not a large tree, but it's good size. And then I made the canopies of the trees to be 2 feet for each inch of diameter breast height, so that a 20-inch tree has a 40-foot canopy, which is probably a pretty good average and about representational. And I placed those, and you can see some of the black dots up there. And that's a real size. The trees range in size from 8 to 34 inches. So a 34-inch tree has a 68-foot canopy. That's wider than many of the single-family lots in the city. And I think if you think about the big oaks that are up there, that's the right size. So when we lose one of those, we get a hole that big. Or we lose that much cover because it may not be in a continuous canopy to begin with. So that's 05. And then I added 06, which had 191 removals. And you really, the colors don't show. I have some other representation as we go along. There were 191, it's the same, an average of about 20 inches, and the same things are up there. There's a close-up, and what isn't showing up, I'm not sure why, is the yellow. On my screen it's green and yellow and red, and it works. And the colors up there are a bit wiped out. But double the black dots, I guess, is one way you can think about it, because it was sort of the same amount each year. And think about how much green we're losing. Air cleaning capacity, stormwater management storage, all those things. We're losing twice as much as we see the black dots there every year. This maybe shows it. Now the red disappears into the purple. This was sort of supposed to give you both, and on my screen I can see all the red and all the yellow, and it looks like a very nice starry night with more stars than we'd ever see in Washington nowadays. And then we get to what we're replanting. And that yellow dot, the gray space, represents 1 year's removal by permit. And the yellow dot is what we're putting back. So how can we even think we're keeping up? And so that's a representation that I wanted you all to see. I don't know what to do about it, but I think the first step is being aware of what's happening. Over the next year, as I figure out what's happening, I'll be working sort of in research and talking with others and networking and trying to find out what has happened elsewhere. But we're sort of heading towards what happened to BC when Dutch elm disease came in. There's going to be a period where we're not going to have a canopy. There's nothing we can do to prevent that. What we can do is shorten the time span that we're in that condition. I'm not sure how we do it best, but that's what I think we have to sort of accept one fact and start working towards the other. Questions?
The whole presentation should be no good.
That's it, yeah, yeah.
So that's up here then. Because of the way our audio system works, if we're going to have a conversation, we need to do it from up here because this is where the microphones are. You're welcome to either use that mic or to come sit at the table, whatever you would like to do.
Okay.
You can't do both. You can't both hold the mic and come sit at the table because the microphones interfere with each other.
Leave those guys alone.
Well, I want to thank you for the report. In looking at it prior to the council meeting, I also noted the same point that you had made, was that the tree canopy is shrinking. And I guess the question I was going to ask you was what we could do about it. You talked a little bit about what the kinds of impact it has, and that we should be aware of that. And I think that's certainly a really important issue. And if you are going to focus on that over the next year and what we can do to get the tree canopy, but what people have said to us in the past, and it's very much on the same line as what you're saying, is that a lot of our canopy is approximately the same age.
Right.
and that it gets to a certain age and we're going to start to lose the trees, and we need to be replacing them. And what you said to us this evening was that given where we are right now, there's likely to be a time when we are going to lose a significant amount of canopy because it's all the same age, and that we should be thinking now about what we can do to replace it to make that time of canopy loss as brief as possible. Is that basically the message?
That's it, yeah. The program, urban forestry program in Tacoma Park, so it started perhaps 20 years after it should have to prevent the dip.
Okay.
So now we're playing catch up and trying to shorten that dip and open period as much as we can. There's, trees only grow at a certain amount, certain rate of speed. We can only plant sort of so many. The way to catch up is to try and find ways to encourage tree planting now.
Well, here's a question. Through the tree permit process, why couldn't we do something like remove one, replace one, where you have a hearing or you have a process where you inquire as to, what were the reasons the tree is being removed, and if possible, the owner could be responsible for replacing it if they're removing it, or the city perhaps could assist them in some way.
Well, that's already in the permit process do require replacements, but you're replacing a 20-inch tree with a 40-foot canopy with a 1.5-inch tree with a 3-foot canopy. And circular geometry gives us that proportion that those dots showed. That could as easily be a 30-inch tree and its replacement. And also the way the ordinance is written, if a tree is dead or hazardous, it's not required to be replaced. And I would go real light on requirements, because going back and reading some of the literature, letters that were written during rewrites of the ordinance, people say, I cut down my trees at 7.5 inches so that they're not covered by the ordinance. And so we're sending conflicting messages in some respects by requiring replanting, because people don't want to spend the money, so not everybody wants trees. And so when a tree gets to be something where it's a liability, they're going to take it down, and whether it's a liability of having to replace it or a liability that it's putting material in their gutter, and that costs them money to clean. So I think we really have to go, in my experience, in local government, more to incentives rather than punishment.
What kind of incentives?
A couple of things that I don't know how they would work, so these are just really fresh ideas or unthought of ideas. One is allow people to pre-plant. If somebody has an oak that they call me out to look at, and it's one of those big old ones, and it's on the way out, and you can pretty much tell 5 to 10 years beforehand, if we can get them to plant 3 trees today and let them have a permit in 5 to 8 years without having to then replant, we would have trees that were in the ground for 5 years, ready to grow the moment they get exposed to that fresh sunlight. And so they'd be established. And that is, we're 5 years ahead of the game. If you plant a tree now, it takes 3 years to get its roots out, to get established, to get drought resistant, and then it starts to grow. So if we can do that while the tree that they're going to replace it with is still there, we're ahead of the game. The nursery we're using, we could get bulk discounts on trees, do a installed tree sale, say in starting at Arbor Day, where we would hire a nursery to install plants, or we would gather the orders for, say, if we get 20 trees, we get a certain price break over the residential, what Harry homeowner pays. If we get 50, we get another percentage off, and we manage the purchase and installation of the trees for the homeowners. So they get our bulk discount, so to speak, that kind of thing. And so there's ideas out there that I just haven't seen, but those are a couple that I've heard or thought of.
Sounds like municipal tree aggregation. Bruce and then Colleen.
I like both ideas you just put forth. I've been aware of the difficulty of the first one that you addressed. I faced it myself with, putting in a replacement and having to work, game the system to make sure that my replacement fit, so I didn't have to do 2 replacements. And I know what it costs to put those little trees in one at a time. And so the second solution is a great idea, and if people know that this is going to be done and it's going to be a decent tree and planted properly, I can see where people would want to be in on a system like that, and it would be viable to do. So I like those ideas, and I would encourage both of those.
Colleen?
That was a great report. Thank you so much for putting together the visual images. I know that they do a great job of telling the story. I could see your actual computer screen there, which helped me because I was sitting behind instead of in the front row. And one of the things that I noted is that I know that there's a couple of trees that were cut down in the backyard of somebody on Colby, and this was before you came along, and the arborist, one of the neighbors called the arborist in a panic, and they went out there and stopped them, and now there's these 2 trees, that are this big around, that is just the stalk of the tree, and all the limbs have been taken down, and the dots aren't on there, and that just happened, I think, in 2005. They didn't get a permit, so this represents everybody who went through the process and got a permit, but doesn't tell the story of everybody who on the sly goes and cuts down a tree, and just within a 2-block radius of my house, I'm aware of several incidents where that happened. So I imagine if you extrapolate that across the city, that's also significant.
Right. And I've written several violations. There was one guy that took down 4 trees, including double 24-inch trunk white oak over off of Jackson.
In my ward?
Their whole yard, no. Over, I don't know the neighborhood, over near New Hampshire. In that finger that sticks up off to the east. 2 mulberries, a double trunk white oak, and I guess it was an 8-inch cherry out in the front yard was gone as well. He was renovating the house, and it was cost of business to get those trees out of there. He thought it would up the value of the house to not have the trees leaning over it, and so they came down. He paid the fine, and...
Well, I just had a tree cut down in my yard that was dying and dropped a giant branch on my young neighbor's car and did $6,000 worth of damage to his car. And when I moved into the house 2 years ago, I had the arborist come out and look at it, and the arborist thought, it had 5 to 10 more years. And I talked at that point about planting a tree there so it could start growing, and they said to me basically, if you plant the tree now, you won't get credit for it. And I said, that's really stupid. But then I became a council person. I got really busy, and I was going to plant the tree anyway and didn't do it. And then, now I have this gaping hole there, and I have to cope with that. And, when I was in Oakland had a street tree plan, and I gave a copy of it to Daryl. And the thing I thought was really great about Oakland Street Tree Plan is that it gave you a guideline so that it helped with the neighborhood values because everyone would have the same kind of trees. So you're in terms of the front street trees. Right. It also was really clear about what kind of trees were best for your area, and it had all the little microclimate data, so you knew what would tolerate what kinds of environments. In Oakland as well, we have a lot of stream areas. My house happened to be built on a stream, and so my tree that I planted died. But it's good to know what trees will survive in the stream bed at the bottom of the hill versus the top of the hill. And for me personally, and that would be really helpful because I'm about to plant several trees on my property, and I'm kind of at a loss as to what to plant, and that kind of a thing would be, some kind of guidelines would be really helpful to me. The other thing that Oakland did was they also did that deal where the city basically became the tree planter, and we had to cut the sidewalks, and they told us exactly how big, and they marked them for us. And we had to cut them and dig the holes, and then they came out and planted the tree. And they would plant, the little 1.5-inch tree for free, but then I paid another $400 or $500 to upgrade my tree so that I had a bigger tree. And so I got a really big tree, which is what I wanted, one that was further along. But the city still paid the first, whatever $200 of the cost was. And that worked really well. And it got the neighbors to kind of organize to get everybody on their street to do a tree planting, and it helped the neighbors to encourage other people.
And that was for street trees or private trees?
That was street trees.
Okay. So, here in town, we plant street trees, 2.5. That's part of the city pays all of that. Upgrading, we can talk about it, but once you pass a certain size, if you plant a 2-inch tree and a 4-inch tree that is that much larger, by the time the 4-inch tree regrows its roots and starts to grow, that 2-inch tree is 95%. So there's if you want to make a big impact, you buy a big tree, but then it sits while it recovers.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I thought it was a really effective partnership, though, to let the residents kick in a little bit money, and I thought it worked really well.
It would work in parts. I was thinking we would be the handler for trees on private property.
Sure. That would help me, too.
That would help you, too, absolutely. And that would afford, yes, in a personal landscape, a big tree can be worthwhile because it does have that immediate impact, and you're not concerned so much with the 40-foot growth as the first 15 or 20 feet, which is what puts it in proportion to your house.
So let's see, the way the roll works, aren't bigger trees. The other thing is that, there's an advantage that the people who do maintain and plant trees on their property have that passes on to the entire community, even the people who clear their lots and plant grass. And I was wondering if there's some way we could look at more of a performance-based kind of measure, because right now our measure is kind of try to preserve the status quo, if you will. If you've got a tree, or if you've got 5 trees when you buy your property, then you need to maintain all of those 5 trees, or ultimately, get fined $1,000 for cutting one of them down. I wonder if there's some way to think about, and I don't have an answer to this, about a way to give an advantage to people who provide broad lot coverage. I mean, some people have practically 100% coverage of their lots, and other people have 0 to 10% coverage of their lot. And those people who have lots and lots of coverage are doing a great service to the city in terms of, the stormwater, cooling in the city, and as you mentioned, providing stands for hammocks, which my trees do a good job of. There are a lot of big advantages there, but we don't really reflect that in how we treat those people.
Okay.
We could try that. They're getting the benefit of those trees themselves and without cost, but enhancing that would be a good idea.
Terry?
Thank you. I think you did a very good job of highlighting the problem that we're facing, and we're already facing it. We're already in it, up to our knees in it. I think I'd like to see 2 things. One is I'd like to see immediately beginning a public education process. There's something in the article in the newsletter that helps to educate the public on the situation we're in with graphics that are a little more under your control. And then secondly, I'd like to see you come back to this council with a plan with several alternatives. We've talked about some things tonight. You proposed a couple things. Councilmember Clay has mentioned a couple things. But I think, having a plan is important, and if you could, present some alternatives to the council, we could make a decision, theoretically. And if you could get some of that in place before budget time, it would be very helpful, because I think the things that you're talking about are going to cost the city some money.
Some of them would, and I'd be glad to do both. I have an article coming in this, not in the one that's being printed now, but the newsletter after that. I've been talking. There'll actually be 2 articles about trees, one talking biology and one talking benefits, in the next 2 issues of the newsletter, which I guess would be the May, June issues.
I think the remove and replace graphic was very striking.
Sort of telling.
Yeah. And I think some discussion of that in conjunction with what we heard tonight during the public comment session on global warming. These things all tie together, and I think your article could help in the beginning of the public education that we need. Thank you.
I would just remind the council that it's unlikely the arborist is going to be able to come back with a plan prior to the budget, since the budget's coming out in 2 weeks. So it's unlikely that...
It won't take him that long to come up with
and very likely the departments have already pretty much put their budgets together at this point. But I would certainly agree with Councilmember Siemens that having the arborist come back with a plan for doing what we can to recover from the canopy loss that we know that we're going to be experiencing would be very helpful. I think asking you to do it before the budget is probably unrealistic, but I would like you to do it maybe on a slightly longer time frame.
Be glad to come back with actually a suite of ideas that
that'd be good.
People can contribute to.
Sure.
Thanks. I had a question about the what you presented. When you showed the canopy loss and then the amount of tree canopy added through plantings, did that canopy loss include permits and waivers? Was it basically all trees that were removed?
That was all trees removed. Okay. Including those that had died. Right. So it's canopy loss represented by the numbers of trees cut down, whether living or dead. Okay. Good, because otherwise it would have been a much worse picture if you had left out waivers. Right. Okay. The ideas you expressed are things that we've been kicking around before volume discounting, so that residents don't have to individually do this. And then part of the education, I think, will be the promotion of the program. Correct. So you kind of came out of the starting gate by saying, plant trees, and I really like that. I remember that well, and I knew that we would have some good initiatives coming from you. I would like to see that whatever program the council agrees to put in place, that between now and when that can be funded, the promotion and the build-up and the marketing of it is something that we take very seriously, because, really it's generally a tree-loving community, and then trying to frame things in a way that people see more the benefits and less of the detrimental effects. That's also part of our job. And the other thing I wanted to say is about trees in the business district. And I know you've got some plans for street trees, but in Old Town, we've really suffered over the last 5 years in losing a lot of trees for a variety of reasons. And I don't know how fast you can get that on track, but it really is not
not just about tree canopy, it's also about economic vitality in our commercial area.
I'm not sure when that stretch of road renovation or sidewalk renovation was going to bid. It's been off and on, but there are in the plans that the LOM has been talking with. We have a tree selection. We have trees in the project for all of the existing tree pits, and then I think a couple of more going from, well, I guess, Columbia back to Old Town.
Well, okay. I know that Laurel got the trees already put in.
Right.
But then from Laurel down to, I guess it's Columbia.
To Columbia.
Right. There need to be some, and I don't know if the tree pits need to be reconfigured.
They're going to be reconfigured and trees are planted, and that's part of the plan that it keeps coming and going off of the county public hearing or something.
Oh, is that right? Still hasn't gotten approval?
Board of Public Works for county is approving, state is approving funding for that section. And then is there another reach?
It is a state highway, so it makes sense that it would be state funding for it. Yeah.
State funding. And so there are trees in that section, which I don't know what the latest is. It may be going in this summer.
Okay.
And we've picked out, we'll be putting in honey locust.
Okay.
As a single tree, so they can all be managed and grow and create the alley effect without interfering with the business signs, which is always important concept.
All right. Very good. Thanks.
I think this is really terrific. I'm really excited about what you're doing and some of the plans you've talked about tonight. I agree thoroughly with what was said earlier about as soon as is practicable to bring forward some plans that we can go, put some money there too.
Sure.
One issue that came up I want to ask you about during my campaign, I went around neighbor Ward 5, which includes a lot of the adjoining property to Sligo Creek, on both sides of Sligo Creek, and then there's a little, I think it's called Northwest something or other. I forgot the exact name of it.
Northwest Branch.
Yeah, thank you. And quite a few of the residents were, who had been there a long time, were concerned about trees that were essentially right along the creek that then fell on somebody's car or house. And they wondered if the city could do something about that kind of thing. Things like if you were able to do an inspection and say these 5 trees are potentially, they're either dead or going to be dead very soon, can we get the county to take them down, or some similar sort of thing. I wonder if you thought about the trees that are essentially adjoining,
right,
I'll call it adjoining property, but that are not literally within Tacoma Park, but when they do fall, they end up on our property.
I know the Park and Planning, Parks Division has been through several times. They spent a lot of time dealing with trees that were killed by the trail and sewer line that went in, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I could call and get somebody to walk with me. I don't think I should make that call, but I would be glad to contact my peer at Park and Planning and walk the creek. If you want to send me a map with some highlighted areas, I'm not sure where you're talking about that a tree from the creek would hit a house. I'd be glad to go take a look. And there are some stream erosion issues, which if you cut the tree off before it falls, the root mat stays there and holds the bank and prevents erosion at the same time. So it's
There's a little
two benefits out of it.
There's a little bit of history to that. At the time that they did the sewer work, there was concern that a lot of the trees that were healthy at that point would someday die, and the county was, their sort of approach to it, or Park and Planning's approach to it, was to basically take down anything that might at some point die. And there was a lot of back and forth between people in the city and people at Park and Planning about whether you should take down every potentially dangerous tree or whether we should be a little bit more conservative and sort of see what happened to them over time. And my understanding was that part of the agreement that we reached is they weren't going to take down all of the trees that they wanted to, but that they were going to sort of keep an eye on them and see if they, over time, if they did decline, and if so, then they would take them down if they needed to. But it sounds as if that hasn't been happening on their end. I don't know if we have any additional history with that.
I think what I read in the files was that they came back for a couple of years, but when the sewer was done 7 years ago.
That sounds about right.
I think it was during the first Todd's term, and I think they came back for the 2 years following that, but I'm not sure they've been back since. And so, yeah, they've got 5 years worth of decay. Now is time to do it again. I'll be glad to work with them.
Yeah, and just in case they think the solution is that, well, they'll just take everything down, or everything that might potentially die at some point in the future. I mean, that was sort of their approach initially. Right. But I understand having to come back repeatedly takes more work, but it also preserves more trees that way. So I would agree with your notion that they should come back and take another look at it.
Sure.
But don't let them take down everything.
We work through the ISA worksheet and judge the hazard potential and make sure that they do reach a hazard ranking before we take them down. It's a lot easier than arguing.
Okay. Are there other, Bruce?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up for a second on your graphic on what I'll call the blueberry in the pancake for the replacement. And I'm thinking about what that might look like if we did everything that we could, made changes in our ordinance, and maybe even if we had gotten ahead of the curve and, been where we needed to be from, we got our 20-year jump on things. What size would that little speck in that big sphere look like?
It wouldn't necessarily.
My sense is it would get bigger, but it wouldn't get real big.
There's two things actually. I mean, if the city had gotten ahead and been planting trees for 20 years, that wouldn't have any effect on that graphic. That's 1 year's worth of removals and replacements.
Right.
If replacements were required for dead, dying, hazardous trees, which right now are waivers, which means no replacement is required, you might have 3 blueberries, but that's about it. And so to fill that other void, that's the enhancement or the I've lost the word, but the encouragement to plant has to come from there.
Right. So I think that where we are is that we need to get people's attention with the circumstances that we find ourselves in, but even if we were to get ourselves out of that hole over a period of time, people need to realize that it takes constant attention to something like that to not get there, so that it can be, okay, well, I can do something. I have this particular situation that I have to deal with right now, and I'd like to do the right thing beyond that and, maybe plant another one. But what they need to realize is that it's not just that one extra that's going to make a difference. It's going to be the whole street, the whole neighborhood, and continued vigilance for years and decades.
Yes. I have to amend myself. I think if we do pre-planting, and the trees don't sort of come on the radar until the removal happens, then that dot does get a lot bigger. If a tree's been there for 5 years, it's now got an 8-foot canopy instead of a 3-foot canopy. And the thing about the geometry of circles
is 3.1415. And so for every foot, you're actually a lot bigger. And so the benefits of pre-planting is really quite outstanding.
Okay. So I guess thank you for that explanation, and I guess I would encourage you, if in the education effort we kind of scare people a little bit with that blueberry and the pancake, maybe we ought to say, and for each one of these, here's a simple graphic of the impact of this action that could be taken. Here you can see it.
Over year. Yes, that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Well, thank you very much for that good report, and I agree with my colleagues that we should have you come back and give us some of those recommendations as part of an overall program, and I think those are very good ideas. And as you can see, the council is quite concerned about doing what we can to maintain as much of the canopy as we're able to over time. So thank you very much for that report.
Thank you.
The next item is a discussion of our street restoration program, and I think we're going to start with another PowerPoint. So the council will get its exercise this evening by moving down to the front again. All right. All tonight?
No, it's not all tonight.
Gonna work on that. Gonna work on that. Big evergreen. Nothing compares to better barriers.
He's got sound.
They don't drive there only once. Let's go to give this song.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Ali Khalilian. I am tonight going to present you with what we call an overview of street innovation program. Basically, a state of street innovation program. We're going to use the words renovation, restoration, resurfacing, repairs, all to mean approximately the same thing. In 2003, Council approved, authorized the street study, which probably is better defined as pavement condition survey, with four objectives. The first objective was to evaluate all city street conditions. And I'd like to narrow that down to evaluate all the pavement conditions in the street. And obviously, the streets were rated based on the condition of the pavement. And follow that up with a recommendation for restoration or repair and a cost estimate. Engineering firm EBA was put in charge of that. In this report, we try to give you a brief description of the methodology that was used in the street study or pavement renovation or pavement condition survey, rather, followed by about the work that has been done to date under that program, our own criteria for setting up the program, and also an overview of what work is planned for this remainder of this year and fiscal years FY08 to 2011. Street condition rating basically is a primary evaluation of the pavements defined by an index called pavement condition rating. And it is a numerical as well as a qualitative rating which is indicative of structural integrity of the pavement and surface operational condition, as the report calls it. That basically means an objective or subjective rather view of the riding surface, aesthetics of the street, etc., which just goes to show you that the rating is valuable, really, rather than a constant, never changing criteria. The PCI number ranges from 0 for failed street to 100 for excellent street, and everything else in between. And the breakdown for qualitative description of those ratings is also given here. A failed street PCI number would be between 0 to 10, and that is a measure of the distress per, say, length of the street or per square yard of the street, as well as the more subjective indications that the inspector would interject into it, such as how the pavement riding surface is raised. Or it is basically concentrated on the pavement itself and not the other evaluation of the street, such as the condition of the curb, sidewalk, the safety issues. Those are some of the criteria that don't really take a front seat in this kind of evaluation, and we have to deal with that. 60.9% of our streets were rated excellent, which is good news. 18.7 miles out of 30.8 miles that were surveyed. We had 16.6% of our streets, 5.1 miles, rated fair. And fair means, obviously, it's obvious what it means, but some of these fair streets also were candidates for restoration or resurfacing, as we see later. 22.4% of our streets were rated fail to poor, which amounted to 7 miles. And there's a better breakdown of it in the bar chart there, correlating the ratings, qualitative ratings, with the mileage of present under each rating. As you can see there, we have a good number of streets. We had a good number of streets at that time that were rated excellent. The pie here shows that most of our streets were good and excellent. And 22.1% or 22.4% failed to poor or very poor, which brings us back to the methodology of repair or restoration that was recommended by the state study and our own criteria for implementing the program. We had 2 miles of the street that were recommended for total reconstruction. Total reconstruction obviously means that we need to do a base course, 4 inches of base course, any subgrade repair that is necessary, and 2 inches of surface course. 7 miles of the street which were up for, these ratings of these streets are also correlated elsewhere, but some of these 7 miles, most of them are poor to very poor, and there are some that are fair, but they're also up for the surface based on other criteria. 2 miles were recommended for just patching and crack filling, sealing, and no action was recorded for 1.2 miles. In total, 12.1 miles named for some kind of routine maintenance or seal patch, surfacing, or total reconstruction. Item 1 and 2's total cost was estimated to be $4,096,000 based on the criteria that the investigators had at the time. We devised a program to implement the study studies result on a multi-year program, obviously. And our rating of the streets or scheduling of the streets were based on 4 criteria, which I have tried to formulate here. And they are all overlapping and interchangeable. So the street study rating was our primary focus in a scheduling. Well, the street that's failed obviously going to take precedent over a street that is fair or rated fair in terms of street rating and its pavement condition. We almost continually verified and modified the street rating because the condition of the streets is a dynamic condition. It will change over time with various factors. The other consideration that we had in scheduling the work in a multi-year program was logistical consideration. And by that, a good example of that would be a clustering of work in order to optimize effectiveness of this execution, scheduling, and reduce time and energy and mobilization costs. An example of clustering is like a street that's rated 12 and is adjacent to a street which has 46 rating, for example, would take precedent over a street that's rated 5, and a 50 would probably take precedent over 46 based on this consideration and other consideration. The other consideration that I'm naming is public safety and the lifespan of the project, which can be explained by like traffic calming projects that we have. Traffic volume, like a street like Maple Avenue, for example, in front of us here, is probably a more candidate for renovation on its own merit, of the geographic location of it, and the volume that it takes. And the expected deterioration, obviously, as the traffic volume is higher, we would expect that the pavement would deteriorate faster, so we would actually probably do a good street in the anticipation that in a couple of years it probably would not be as good. Other works planned for the streets, as all of you probably know, WSSC has been working in the city to renovate upgrade their water and sewer lines, and that would have caused us to actually hold on to some projects which would have been otherwise done. And there was also some streets that were identified, for example, for CDBG money, funding to be used. And of course, we did those on the schedule of CDBG, which is not necessarily corresponding to our street rating or other criteria that I've described here. This probably brings us back to the report of the work that has been done to date. 77 street segments, when I call segments or sections of streets, because streets are sometimes not all of the streets are rated the same way. Blocks that are rated worse than others. And therefore we just don't go by the street as the name is, or continuity of a street by name, the street sections. These 77 streets amount to 8.2 miles, or 43,575 feet. That has been done since July of 2004 to this date. The actual cost of this work has been $2,841,584.30, as opposed to the estimated cost for a street study of $2,591,606. Our cost per linear foot is $65.21. The street studies cost was $59,477. Obviously, we did more than the street study actually intended for us, and what was necessary by the criteria I described. Again, this is another representation of the work that has been done by the qualitative rating. We did 2 street segments that were failed, 26 that were very poor, 28 poor, and 17 streets that were rated fair. But most of them were actually recommended for total reconstruction. 7 streets that the street study rated them as good were done due to the consideration I just went over for you. The streets that are not done yet and are represented by the white squares there, a white segment of the bar, are scheduled to be done between the remainder of this year, fiscal year 08 to 2011. Some of the streets that were not done are unfortunately in a poor condition, and the reason for delay has been the work that is pipe replacement for WSSC. This is another actually breakdown of the work that was done in correlation with the rating that was done with the original study. 73% of the streets that we have done have ranged in rating from fail to poor, or very poor fail. 21% of the streets done are rated fair. 9% obviously were rated good, which for logistical reasons and other criteria, a decision was made to restore those streets as well. This is just a graphical representation on the city map of these streets that were done based on the rating. Failed streets were, that is Heather Alley and Plainswood, that were failed and they're subject to total reconstruction. Because there were other streets that we did total reconstruction on, which means 6-inch milling, putting a base and repairing the subgrade and the surface course, which weren't rated as fair, but very poor generally, and some poor streets. Very poor streets are represented here, scattered in the city with a yellow highlight. And I can't read it from here, I'm not sure what you. The poor streets are represented purple. Again, there's a good scatter of them on basically both extremes of the city, east and west. Fair streets are again, some are were recommended for reconstruction, some weren't. There was no 1.2 mile of no action on them, some of which were done. Good streets are again highlighted here, and these are the good streets that they, for one reason or another, Maple Avenue is one of them. Park Avenue, segments of Park Avenue were rated good. Other segments were, for example, rated fair, but we clustered them together and did all of them instead of going back to them a few years until the good becomes bad or fair. This is the total work that was done between the fiscal year 04 to 07, and a little bit about cost impact is the cost of construction material has increased in the past 3 years between 20 to 50%, according to some reports. Our own contract, up to about 15%, which I reported to you that last year. The factors that impact our cost are probably delays, because the time, as you can see on those sharp rays in the curves, means that we're going to have to pay more for the same work more rapidly. Sometimes we have to expand the scope of the project because of the stormwater considerations surface drainage, or putting under drains in to keep the streets dry. It's a cost that wasn't really included in our street study, which was basically a pavement condition survey. Traffic calming projects that obviously we have to sequence them, so some delay in order to develop the project. We have to postpone them so we could postpone the street resurfacing so we could actually implement the traffic calming, such as putting circles. A good example, ongoing example is Elm Avenue and Lincoln, which we are working on right now. With that, I will give the floor to Darrell to talk about the future restoration projects that we have here, 2,137 for the remainder of this year, which amounts to 5 segments of the street. For FY08, we have 6 streets amounting to 2,187, and during the years of 2009 to 11, we will do 12 streets amounting to 5,843 linear feet. That would probably cover all the streets in the street study. And, go ahead.
I don't know how to shift the basically, Ali had asked me to lay out sort of what our vision is for the remaining years. I think the in your council package you'll have a list of completed streets as well as he displayed it up here in the overhead. We know what we're going to be doing for the remainder of this year in fiscal year 07. Once we finish the traffic calming project on the intersections of Elm and Lincoln and Elm and Auburn, we'll be resurfacing that street. We'll probably be doing sections of Elm in portions. We may not get to go all the way up to Larch. Unfortunately, as has more often been the case than not, WSSC has not completed the project there as they had originally intended. So there's a large section of curb that's missing from Devonshire to Larch that may slow down our resurfacing project. We've offered to do it for them, but based on the way the contract was bid, we can't do that. So we'll probably be resurfacing from Ethan Allen to Devonshire and then do the remainder next year. The Maple Avenue project, where you've seen the pedestrian safety measures taken in and the curb bump outs and the general reduction of the street width to enhance the overall aesthetic of the street, we'll be resurfacing that street actually coming up in the first week of April. So those 2 projects are what we have remaining for this fiscal year. That ends that ends at the end of June. Coming up, our proposed base of work in fiscal year 08, and again, this is proposed, though I say most of these projects are pretty sure bets. Cleveland Avenue, we're currently doing a stormwater project on that street. That had to be done prior to the street resurfacing, so we're anticipating once that stormwater project is completed, we'll be able to resurface that street, which again was one of those streets probably in pretty bad shape and needing to be addressed. But as soon as we went to that street to start the resurfacing project, we were aware of the stormwater projects that had to be addressed before that street could be paved. The remainder of Elm Avenue will be finished in fiscal year 08, as will Linden Circle, which abuts Elm Avenue and is connected to it. And then lastly, Heather Avenue. And now in Heather Avenue is a case where we have a street where we are getting some funding for WSSC to do the resurfacing of that road. We have worked out cost share arrangements with the WSSC on specific cases. If the pavement condition is good and they're going into the street, we can oftentimes work out an arrangement where they will agree to pay 50% of the resurfacing cost for the portion of the street they're affecting. So we will be getting some payment from WSSC towards Heather Avenue resurfacing. But we don't have the dollar figure yet, nor the price agreed to at this point. That's our proposed work for fiscal year 08. In 09, all these projects are WSSC remaining projects. Davis Avenue, where WSSC is currently doing some work. Darwin Avenue, the section of Maple Avenue from Sligo Creek Parkway to Hilltop, and a section of Westmoreland. Now, you may recall in Westmoreland we went ahead and did some concrete work in anticipation of the the WSSC project. I believe we did some concrete work on Darwin as well. So in cases where we knew WSSC was going to be slowing down our process, we tried to take advantage of our current costs by getting as much concrete done and out of the way, while knowing that we needed to wait for the asphalt work. I think generally that was the right decision to make, though it has led to some confusion on the part of residents. Of course, we're here and then we're not for a while. And then, of course, when WSSC shows up, there's a lot of frustration. But once we are finally able to resurface the street, I think things will be looking pretty good. Now, again, once you start talking 2 years out, none of it has a crystal ball. That's what we're proposing. But these will all be based on WSSC's progress as well as our budget, which has been proposed in the capital budget for 5 years out. The work planned in fiscal year 10, again, these are all WSSC projects: Albany Avenue, Buffalo Avenue, Jackson Avenue, from Glenside to Wildwood, and then a section of Wildwood Drive from Kirkland to Ann Street. I don't know anything of note in any of these streets. I think we have done some concrete work in the Albany and Buffalo area, and on Wildwood Drive in Jackson. So we're ready for these streets once WSSC has completed their water and sewer line work. And then finally, this is the tail end of the list. In fiscal year 11, we have Cheney Drive, Baltimore Avenue, Grant Avenue, and Palmer Lane. Now, Palmer Lane was a street that was missed on the street study, so that's why you see it there, indicated that it was not rated. 2 of these streets are awaiting WSSC work. So the way these projects lined up in the out years from 08 to fiscal year 11 is largely as a result of the WSSC work, but also as a result of their pavement condition index. So we've tried to balance out condition as well as the proposed budget for the remaining out years. Once this time comes and we've gotten this far, we will have completed every street that was addressed in the street study, which is, as you may recall, when I was out here talking to you, whenever that was, 2004, about please give us the street loans so we can go to town on these streets. It's pretty much what we had said we were going to do. We were going to use the $2 million to take the brunt of the worst streets, and then over the remaining 5 years, work our way through every street up to the fair condition streets. And that's where we'll find ourselves in 2011, with roads in much better condition citywide as a result of the funds that you all approved, and we've been able to do quite a bit of work with. So with that, I think our presentation is done.
Well, thank you for that very helpful presentation. I'd like to reinforce the point that you made at the end, Darrell, that about our taking out the street loan. Given the graphic that you showed about the increase in the cost of asphalt and materials, it seems like trying to do a bunch of streets all at once when we got the loan, it has turned out to be a very wise thing to do, because not only would the streets have deteriorated, but it looks like the cost of materials would have gone up quite a lot. So we're probably saving quite a bit of money over what we would have spent if we'd waited until we could do all of them at the small number a year. The other point that I'd like to make in addition to what you said is you're talking about the street program starting in 2004. And in fact, the council has been working on streets since about, I don't remember whether it was 92 or 93. So this is phase 2, essentially, of the street program, and a number of the streets that you didn't mention were, in fact, streets that were done prior to 2004. It's not that we haven't done them, it's just that you're giving us a report on the program that started in 2004, which is, I think, why you didn't mention some of the streets. And so Right. And I appreciate that, and that's very helpful. Are there council questions or comments? Everybody keeps putting their hands up in the same order. Bruce, and then Colleen, and somebody over here. Oh, Doug.
Two hands.
Harry. Yeah, I agree with the mayor's point that there was a lot of work done before, and that's why there were hardly any colored bars on the chart in Ward 3, because they had all been done previously. But I know that with WSSC's work that they're coming into streets, including mine, that were done relatively recently, and I wonder if you could just address how we're going to be dealing with that work, since by the information you showed there at the end, anything that they might do on a street that was in better than fair condition isn't going to be addressed for some time. Is there part of that cost sharing that gets banked, or how are we dealing with that?
That's the proposal at this point, and again, we haven't signed any contracts with WSSC, but we have had numerous discussions with their staff about cost sharing arrangements, particularly on streets like Lincoln, that were repurposed within about 7 years or so. When they were last doing the water and work, which didn't take, so now they're back in again to repair and replace.
Oh, so that's a little different explanation, and the words you just used make sense to me. The repairs that they tried didn't take?
Yeah, there was technology that they were using back then, which showed promise at the time, and was a less invasive way to do the work, so they explored that. And a number of the streets there that were done by WSSC in the past, less than 10 years, are those streets where different technologies were used, and now they use for that thing.
Right, because that was essentially the concrete relining?
Yes. What we have in terms of a principal agreement is that anytime we have a street which we would rate good or better, they will do a 50% cost share with us on the surfacing. And that doesn't address sidewalks, curbs, gutters, driveways, and anything else, which for us is at least 20% of the cost of doing the street if it hasn't been addressed in a while. They'll do a 50% match on resurfacing cost. Since we aren't there yet, what I envision will happen is that WSSC may be getting to these streets if we believe their schedule in the next couple of years. Before we're ready, or actually probably before the streets even need to be resurfaced, they will come in and do a permanent patch on the streets. I think the contract on permanent patches is a little up and down. But my understanding is
You're being charitable.
I'm trying to be gentle, because we are asking them for money. But when they're doing a project like this, where they basically cut a trench in the street and are replacing the line, then their contractors are on board, on place, and have the requirement to do compaction. We ask for compaction test results, and we've had some success in getting that. And then they'll be resurfacing the patch as well. What happens now when they come out sort of house and do a repair, they have one construction crew that actually is digging it up, doing the pipe connection work, fixing it up, and then just dumping the dirt back in the hole. They have a whole other contract that comes out and does the permanent patch repair. So it's two entirely different crews, two entirely different contractors, and they're not at all connected or associated. So one schedule doesn't match the other schedule, which is why we have so many small utility cuts in front of the person's house where they had a line break or added a meter, where they haven't gone back to the permanent patch. For the new type of projects where they're doing practically every water line to every house connection on the street, the contractor will be doing the full scale of work in there. They'll be compacting and then they'll be putting up the patch on top. So it's our understanding that we should end up with a street that's in fairly good condition at the end of a permanent patch. With that said, it will be a permanent patch in the street that was otherwise a smooth surface. So they do agree in concept to the 50% cost share. Our recommendation is to negotiate that 50% cost share with them and then keep it in a similar street fund as we've been spending for the past few years, where it's in the bank, it's there, and when we do that street, those are the funds we use and reduce by half the funds the city needs for that asphalt work. My understanding that that kind of concept is amenable to the city manager, and that's the way we'd like to proceed in the future.
Yeah, because that's the whole issue that we were dealing with for years with various utility companies, was doing the work and then having everything all cut and disrupted and patched. And
Well,
And-
UPSSC used to require us to do the work and then request reimbursement. They
Right.
agreed to pay. We had a contract with them, but we had to do the work first. We now are on the same page where they're just going to agree to the cost, pay us up front, and then the city can do the street whenever it wants to pay.
Okay. And I'll just observe again so I can keep making the point kind of on the record so it doesn't get lost. I don't have much hope of the situation necessarily changing, but I'll remind everybody that for a long time before this 2004 study, we did not have in our way of doing the street repairs and renovation a way of dealing with conditions that we found once we got to a street that might not have been what we hoped or thought, so that in any number of instances we renovated a street, we milled, and before we overlaid again, we knew that we were overlaying on top of not much. And so that I know in the case of the 300 block of Lincoln, if WSSC does their patch and puts their trench and compacts and does everything else, that trench and that patch will be in better shape than the rest of the street. And so long term, we still have a whole lot of those streets out there that didn't get the kind of attention that we put into the streets that were covered in the failed and very poor categories with the 2004 study that addressed some of those structural issues. So we've still got a whole bunch of streets out there that may look pretty on the surface, but are not going to last as long as we'd like.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for adding Palmer Lane to the list. I note that they're due in 2011, and I would say that you might want to start now on negotiating with people around the issues on Palmer Lane, because I've heard from lots of people about the drainage issues and that they're significant. I think it's going to take a long time to hammer out. Maybe not 4 years, but so a lot of people that want to have a stake in that. But thank you for adding it. I would like to also note that when I was running for office and I was campaigning on Elm Avenue, people would say to me, why don't they repave this street? It must be that the mayor is afraid that it's going to show some favoritism. And then other people would say nobody could believe that the mayor was given the condition of this street, nobody could believe that there was favoritism on the part of the mayor. Please tell me to pave the street. And gosh, that's been a year and a half, and the street has been torn up that whole time. And I saw that it's not due for a while, and Heather Avenue even longer.
Next year.
Yeah. So I appreciate anything that you do to make that happen sooner. I realize that there are all kinds of things that are out of your control, and offering to do the curbs or whatever it takes, I think is great. That's been in a bad shape for a long time. I have a question. I noticed that I was looking at the Ward 2 streets, and several of them cost significantly less than we thought. But one of them, Larch Avenue from Elm to Glazewood, was, the street study estimated cost was $45,000, and the actual cost was $155,000. I'm just curious, what's the $110,000 difference? There's like 6 houses in the area between Elm and Glazewood Court. I mean, it's short.
Say the name of this street again.
Larch. I remember some of what was going on Larch. We had a lot of groundwater problems.
Is that Larch?
Larch, yeah.
But first of all, we did a lot more than the street study asked for doing. There were segments of Larch Avenue that were rated very poor. Some were poor, some were fair, and even a segment was marginally good, according to street study. But as we opened the street, a segment of Larch Avenue was up for total reconstruction. On top of that, total reconstruction means there was no base.
Oh, right. Because I noticed you came out, you did some work, and then you took that up and redid it all over again. So it was the base of the street that was the issue.
We left the segment of the street for like about 2 months. We don't put on the surface out.
Right.
And the reason was when the trucks were running over it, they were just tearing up the asphalt
I see.
and base because of the water situation there.
Okay.
So there was a lot of problems. And I guess the $45,000 was estimated for just the parts that were to be
Like just the
fully
pavement
made.
part.
And we did like a lot more linear footage and a lot deeper base repair on that.
Okay, that was a
Should
huge
have
gap. And just a heads up, I happen to live on Hayward, so I see this all the time, but 3/4 of the way down the street, there's clearly a spring under the street that pumps water up through it all the time. You can see the stains in the street from where it's at. And I
That's
imagine
probably where the, were you here then, where the equipment, the paving equipment sunk into the road surface when we were doing the road. So we attempted to do some repairs there, but yeah, there's definitely a soft spot in the street, and it's about, from my recollection, about where you described.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything.
Part of the simplification of the numbers is, and this whole thing about streets versus street segments, is we compacted and compressed information. So like Ali's mentioning, there are some streets where you would read it and think that the whole street was that, but the street study might have just referenced a section or a block, so we don't have all those lines in there indicating prices. So there was probably ones that were been zero, whereas we had costs.
Yes, in my wandering around Ward 6 the last couple of months and driving around the city for a longer period, I occasionally see what appears to be a fairly recently repaved stretch of the road exhibiting signs of premature aging. This takes the form of, I guess, what you'd call alligatoring, and in the case of the place that I may have drawn to your attention earlier in the, couldn't be early in the week, but late last week, this was fairly new paving. I think it was last season. This is Glenside Drive and Merwood. There appears to be like a sinkhole, not a very deep one, but and nor over a very large stretch of the road, but something has happened to it. And I'm wondering whether I'm alone in these observations or whether it might be possible for you to spot check some of the areas that have been done recently for signs of sort of structural problems that may have a similar cause or may be different causes, such as weather or freezing and so forth. And if a pattern were to arise where it did seem like in certain spots there was more wearing than would normally be anticipated given the amount of time since the construction was done, whether there would be some options for the city to ask the contractor to go back and fix those areas that may not have been done in the highest standards of quality that we would otherwise have expected.
Well, we do have a 1-year warranty, though oftentimes those kind of things don't show up 1 year ahead. We do spend a lot of time once the street is milled making sure that the base that's left behind is such that should be paved over without any repairs. So there's quite a bit of driving up and down of heavy trucks, which residents might wonder why is a truck going up and down the street, but it really is an effort to watch the wheels and see if the surface is what they call pumping or moving, to basically evaluate those kind of things, which sometimes are quite obvious and other times aren't. But yeah, we certainly will make an effort to review the streets. There's some new technology that I'd like to try to explore at some point where you actually use some sort of infrared cameras mounted on a truck that drives over a street and identifies failures, alligator cracking, before it's even visible to the eye, so it can identify things like that. And the technology is starting to get used more and more, so I think we wouldn't be something that we would purchase the equipment for, but we'd hire somebody to evaluate the streets that way. But that said, I mean, there's the other situation which I drive over every day, Ritchie Avenue, which is in horrible shape right after it was paved, and totally as a result of WSNC's failure to do the right compaction in the trenches. You can see where the trenches were. You can just watch them up the street. It was after that street that we started requiring WSSC to provide us compaction tests once they went back out and refilled a trench so that we didn't have another Ritchie Avenue situation all over again. But yeah, I know the engineer is aware of it and sensitive to it and has tried to take some steps to keep it from happening.
Yes, and so for whatever the reason, I'd just be very interested to see what your observations are and whether or not there are other problem spots that could be addressed in the manner that we've discussed.
Could you please repeat the location?
Sure. One is on Glenside near Merwood, which it's an area that eventually will have a new speed bump, or the speed bump that used to be there will be replaced, but it seems to be a little further north of that where this area, this large depression just appeared a few days ago. And then I'm sorry, I can't recite off the top of my head some of the other areas that I've spotted around town, but as I drive over them, I'll be more mindful and we'll let you know exactly what I see. But I'd also be interested in your sort of independent review of some of these places that we've recently paved to see if WSSC is the culprit or there may be some other reasons.
Yeah, it could be simply an overlook on a conditional subgrade.
Okay.
There's no denying of that could happen. But we have to try not to let that happen. But I don't know whether that was you or another council member that brought to our attention a few years ago that in Garland Avenue, right before it gets to the floor, there was like a pizza-sized alligator and it started to increase in size.
Right.
We had the contractor go back there, although that wasn't really his doing. There was a water situation there that they took care of a year earlier, but it could be an underground spring or some other water movement that eats into the subgrade and subgrade lost and causes that. But we asked the contractor to go back and repair that area because it was within the 1-year warranty. If there is something that is obviously contractors overlook, we will definitely attempt to ask him to do that.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for this update. I appreciate knowing how we're doing, and it's good to see what was accomplished as part of that special program. I do appreciate the areas that are remaining and the ones that are still in poor condition. I would like to see them move to the improved column, and I'm not sure if what you're wanting from us is a go-ahead to continue on, or but I would like to say that I definitely want to see your work continue in this respect. I don't know if the council will be considering additional financing options, but I like what you've accomplished and what what your future plans are. So please do go ahead.
Well, one of the sort of points of one of the reasons we wanted to do the report now is we have spent the loan funds. So we've spent $2,005,000 as of this fiscal year. The last dollars went to Willow Avenue. So the remaining monies that we'll be using to address the streets at this point are the CIP dollars, the capital budget dollars in the remaining year and in those out years.
Which was what we intended to do
Right.
initially. We intended to do the worst streets with the loan funds and then do the others as we accumulated dollars. Just wanted to follow up on one thing that Colleen mentioned. People on my street have also mentioned to me that what's the good of having the mayor living on the street if you can't even get the street fixed? And I think
Well, we needed a WSSC official living on your street.
that would have done a lot better job. I think Elm was originally scheduled to be done like 5 or so years ago, and then we found out WSSC was coming in, and so it was put off, and then WSSC, if I remember correctly, delayed at least a year, possibly 2. They were supposed to be finished last fall, and they're still there. So they are not only slow, but they are delayed and slow. So
they didn't even change more segments.
They what?
They didn't even segment, like they say, we're going to do it next year. And every time we had a different engineer. to deal with. So the delays were not like, oh, we're going to do it 5 years ago, 5 years hence, but just like next year.
As long as they, on the parts that they don't do this year, as long as they put a permanent patch. I had a friend stop as she was driving down the street, and she said that Elm Avenue, that section of Elm Avenue, looks like a third world country, which is probably an accurate description. So we could get like a permanent patch until they get finished with the work. But thank you very much for this presentation. It's very helpful.
I had a question.
I'm sorry, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. I thank you for the presentation. I found the PowerPoint presentation to be very good. Also entertaining with the sound effects. Thank you. But I see in the handout we have here is a list of the streets that are completed to date. I think it would be helpful to have the list similar to what we had in past years of what is still to be done and itemizing the years when it's to be accomplished. I know you gave us a map that kind of shows that, but I think it's helpful to keep the same format through from year to year. It makes it easier to follow. I wonder if we could get a copy of your PowerPoint presentation.
No problem.
You had a lot of meat in there, a lot of content, and I think it would be helpful.
It'll also be on the web.
Okay. That's great. A couple things I wanted to ask you. I see that the cost per foot has gone up about 10% according to the handout, and I wonder. I know that back when we took the loan out, part of that was that we were locking in the contractor at a given price, and I just wanted to make clear what causes 10%. It's the unexpected curb and sidewalk work, or what is the?
No, even with the contractor, we have 1 year periods, but at the end of the 1 year period, they can provide us information as to an increase in cost that we will then allow the contract price to increase, and it's largely as a result of the asphalt costs. And what the asphalt plant charges, he produces a report for us from the asphalt plant, which says what the charge for asphalt is and how much it's increased over the previous year.
Another point that I wanted to mention is that contract was up, was over a 3 year period, or 2 consecutive 3 years. I'm not sure what was the rule in 2005. So we had to rebid, and they came here to council with 8 different bids, which our current contractor, which we now have, was the lowest bidder at the time. And his cost was between 8 to 15% increased over his own previous contract. And that happened in 2005. So since 2005, we've been paying 15% more in our own contract costs. That is, aside from the cost of asphalt going up staggeringly high, like about something like 25% has increased on our contract now. But the report that I got from, I guess, Engineering News Records is our source. The cost of asphalt has gone up to 50% since 2004. So the world has a 50%, 1.5 factor increase.
Yeah, I may not remember correctly, but I thought part of the selling point for taking out the loan was that we were locking in the asphalt price at that time, at that cost.
Probably did for 3 years. After the 3 years, the contract was renewed in 2005.
I think that's right. But every contract has a clause that allows the contractor to come and request price increases justifiable if they have to justify them. And the cost of asphalt, the price increase of asphalt is something like this area has never experienced before. I mean, costs have been pretty steady up to this point in the last 2 years. Just like you saw in that chart, construction costs have just elevated at an incredible rate.
You mentioned that at FY11, we will be on plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think last year at budget time, didn't you say we were on plan at that point?
To end in FY11. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might have even been FY12 at that point.
I was thinking you said that what was in the original plan for, at that point to date of last year, that we were a little bit ahead of getting streets resurfaced.
Well, in the first year of the project, our prices were coming in significantly under what the street study costs were. After the second and third year, those shifts started changing, and we were at or above the street study estimates. But any report I would have given last year would have had us on track for that time. We always produced a list of streets by year that went to usually 2011 or 2012. So that hasn't changed. We're still working our way through that plan.
Okay. I thank you. I think it, like I said, it would be helpful to get a copy of the PowerPoint and on the website. It'd be great. Thank you.
And just to add to the comments that were made, when we redid the contract, and I think it was about 2005, we looked not only at what we were paying, but we looked at what the county was paying, and we were still paying less than they were for their contracts at that time. So I think we were doing very well.
Please. Just so you know, we're not all in agreement on the PowerPoint.
No.
You don't like the PowerPoint?
About the noise?
I did not find the PowerPoint helpful, and I found the sound effects grating.
You don't like the sound effects. Okay, one vote against the sound effects. All right. Thank you. Thank you all very much. This is actually going toward one of the budget considerations, because this is the presentation you're giving on the streets relating to what the council is going to be looking at in the upcoming budget. So you should keep this all in mind when we look at the budget, the capital improvement budget for street repair.
And Bruce, for your comment, your street will never be repaved again.
I already know that.
Voted for.
Okay, thank you all very much. We appreciate it. And then the last item on the work session discussion is the discussion of the issues pertaining to commercial vehicles in residential areas. I believe that the interest on this, and the part of the staff here, Wayne, is there somebody who's going to be here somebody on the staff who's going to be here for this discussion? Okay. I believe that the interest here was just in knowing what kinds of concerns that the council wanted to raise and what kinds of direction we wanted to give staff in terms of dealing with this issue. And there were a number of people who came during public comment period and raised some concerns which I think were good concerns and ones that we ought to take into account. Is there anything else in terms of the kinds of things that the council was concerned about? Bruce?
I just wanted to make a few comments about the last section that was provided in the cover sheet, where it talks about the Montgomery County zoning ordinance and how that affects some things and maybe some things we might want to consider in how we define commercial vehicle. And what I thought about with that was that basically in my estimation, the Montgomery County zoning ordinance in this area is practically unenforceable because when I looked at the defining commercial vehicles not permitted even on private property in residential districts if they are 19 feet.
No, they are permitted.
They are permitted if they're 19 feet or less. All of a sudden I was going, wait a minute.
On private property.
Right. And what I'd like to point out is that maybe people don't realize it, but if somebody buys a full-size pickup, they are basically not in compliance with the law. That can be, somebody going out just buying a pickup. So if we want to say, we agree with that, that's something that we want to follow, I would imagine, I'll throw a number out there, I bet there's probably 50,000 people in the county who are out of compliance with that ordinance. Because I looked at the sizes of the vehicles on the manufacturers' websites, and basically pickups do not comply. So we don't want to go there.
Okay. Doug, I think you had a comment?
Yes, well, several. The first is Captain Corsi's comments on the first page of the worksheet here, where he expresses the confusion from an enforcement point of view and gives these examples. A U-Haul box truck of any size would be prohibited under this definition. An unattached tractor portion of 18-wheeler rigs are not prohibited. The buses passenger vans and airport limos are not prohibited. I mean, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, whereas ice cream trucks or vans are prohibited. So, I don't know. I mean, we've seen these huge vans that have been left by the tractors, and they're in the residential areas, and they're horrible. So I think that his point is well taken. We need to better define, for the police point of view, what is and is not permissible. The other point that the neighbors brought up, and this is a sticky one, and that is you have these vans that clearly are used as sort of moving offices for the people who own them, and they're often parked 4 and 5 in a line on Jackson Street. According to the code, these are commercial vehicles, and yet we allow them to be parked in the neighborhood without any punishment. And then, of course, the sticky part of it is that people do have a right to make a living. I know that, according to Sarah, this was one of the concerns of the county, wherein they did not want to target this particular kind of vehicle because it is used by people who own these residences for the purpose of making a living, and it would seem unfair to focus and target on them. On the other hand, if you have a situation that exists on Jackson Avenue where you have 5 or 6 of them parked in a row so that they're taking up additional parking spaces, and also they do appear to be a kind of blight, then it suggests that maybe we ought to be looking at them in a slightly different way. In other words, weighing the right of people to make a living by having their vehicles parked out in front that are clearly commercial vehicles and clearly not permissible under the code as it exists now, and the right of the other folks in the neighbors to have free and unrestricted views, not to have commercial vehicles sitting next to or in front of their houses. The other issue is that these are the people that are the homeowners that are parking cars on their front lawns, and they have done so and done it cleverly to get around the prohibition of parking cars on their front lawns by putting a surface down. And the surface in these cases is a gravel drive of some sort. It has been pointed out, though, by the neighbors that in order to get the vehicle on the front lawn, where it's on their private property, they are damaging the new curb that we've just heard we paid a significant amount of money to restore recently. And then there are also the additional issues of potential damage to the trees that are near where the cars are parked, and the fact that they're turning pervious surfaces into potentially impervious ones. So it seems like there's a lot of complexities here. I don't know who came up with the 19 feet or less, but if you've got a box truck sitting in your driveway or their driveway that has recently been paved with grass or with rocks in order to get around that prohibition, it's different than a pickup truck. It's a box truck used clearly for commercial purposes. It has a different aesthetic than a pickup truck, yet because it is it's 19 feet, there's nothing the city can do to prohibit it. So I guess I would ask for some further discussion. I don't know that we can fit it all in tonight, but I'd like to see the code tightened up a bit. I'd like to see it re-examined, and I'd like to have a longer discussion about how we can balance the rights of people to make a living with their trucks parked out in front and the concern of the neighbors that the neighborhood is going to pop because every other house has a panel truck in front of it that's used for commercial purposes.
Okay. Thank you, and I thank my colleague. I think Doug has very succinctly described the dilemma. I have family members and friends who have they're self-employed and they have vehicles that they use, and it would be a great hardship on them not to be able to park at their home. Nonetheless, I think there are some considerations that we have to show our neighbors too, and I think the length of the vehicle isn't necessarily the right formula for determining what's right and what's wrong. I see, and I heard Councilmember Berry describe two core problems. One is street parking and the hardship that can place on a neighborhood from two perspectives. One is the width of the vehicles. If you park a tractor trailer on the side of the road on some of the roads in Tacoma Park, nobody else would be able to go down the road. And then the other thing is having a number of vehicles parked in the neighborhood, and many times those problems are caused not by self-employed individuals, but people who just have a lot of members of their family and a lot of cars and park along the road. So I would like to think that we could address that particular problem in a way that is sensitive not only to the problems of commercial vehicles, but of all vehicles. And then the other core issue that I heard Councilmember Berry describe, and I agree with, is private property and parking of vehicles on private property. And I'm pretty supportive of you own the house and you can do what you want. I mean, we see a lot of homes in Tacoma Park painted colors that would never fly, so to speak, in other neighborhoods. And I think that individuals should have those rights. But there are obviously some situations that can impose on other people's lives. And again, I would like to see if we can't craft something that doesn't necessarily attack commercial vehicles, but is more addressing the real problems of whether it be the percent of the property that is covered with a surface, or the requirement, enforcement of the requirement to use curb cuts to access your property, having proper screening of areas, or not parking things over a certain height in the front lawn. I'm not sure what the solutions are at this point, but I would like to see us not just be reflexive in addressing the individual issues that have come up, but look at the core problems and see if we can't come up with something that addresses the whole situation.
Well, I guess the first thing I'd like to say is that whatever we do has to be enforceable. And it's really disappointing to hear that, I mean, not only us, but the county has these regulations that are unenforceable because they're so important to people. So I guess I'm looking at what Captain Corsi wrote here, and would like to see something that is directly enforceable by the police department. It doesn't, as Sarah talks about on the backside, Montgomery County, where if you see something, it gets referred to the code enforcement division. I mean, you ought to just be able to write a ticket for it, and that's it. If it's obvious to the police officer and the parameters are clear, I think that's the first thing, my first comment is just it has to be enforceable and it has to be easy. The one thing that seems to me to be the code issue is certainly the driveway and the curb cut. I would be afraid to park on my lawn because somebody might come and park their car right behind me and I would be trapped there. And there's nothing that prevents people from doing that because legally they can park right there. But I do think that's a code enforcement thing that we need to enforce. Is there some reason we can't enforce that? that we're not enforcing it?
I think the law is that you cannot park on your lawn or a lawn, but if you put a surface on the lawn, such as a bag of gravel, that constitutes the surface a driveway, and therefore it is permissible. That's the way to get around it, by dumping the rocks on your lawn.
I know that some communities prohibit rock as a driveway surface. It's noisy and dusty. The downside to that is it is permeable, and it's a stormwater issue. So I don't know if there's a way to balance that. I have another question. Aren't commercial vehicles, are they licensed differently? Can you tell by looking at a license plate what is a commercial vehicle in Maryland? No? Okay. Okay, well, that's part, I think, what makes the law really hard. A lot of states register commercial vehicles differentially. They cost more to have a commercially licensed
Here it's all by weight.
It's all by weight. That's interesting. And so then it seems like we have to cope with the parameters in terms of noise and sightlines. And the one lady came and talked about the noise. You could cope with that by limiting your parking spaces to within so far of a distance from your neighbor's house. And that might help the noise. The other issue is sightlines, and I know a lot of communities require people who have motorhomes or other kinds of vehicles to actually park behind the front line of their house, so they have to have enough of a side yard to park there, and they have to have a fence, and that reduces the sight line, and you can't park in the front. So I think there's a lot of different things that we could look at, and I would like to see us take a good look at this and come up with standards that are enforceable and isn't like a laundry list that the police officer always has to get out his cheat sheet that's laminated to see. It should just be easy to tell.
Okay. If I can just provide clarification on the commercial aspect of vehicles. My best explanation for how it works is that you can't tell by the license plate. The sticker that you pay every year depends on weight. And a commercial vehicle, and I've had discussions with people like the park police for parkways and things like that, is, because they'll say, no trucks on a parkway. And it's not necessarily just GW Parkway. It can be certain streets that are defined as parkways. I don't remember what it's called, Little Falls Parkway in Bethesda, various roads like that, or Sligo Creek Parkway. And the way the park police define a commercial vehicle is if it has a sign on the door or the side. And I can tell you from knowing a lot of people who drive trucks that are required to have signs on the door for their professional licensing, what a lot of people do is use magnetic signs. And therefore, when you're using it for work, you put the sign on the door. Like if the inspector's coming, you put the sign on the door. And then when you leave the job, you take the sign on the door, you put it behind the seat, and you are now a truck. You can drive on a parkway. You can go anywhere you want. You are not a commercial vehicle.
Wow, that's crazy.
Let me just wrap this up with a couple of observations based on what people have said. I think there are actually a couple of issues here. There is the issue of parking on lawns, and my recollection is the same as Doug's, that we don't let people park on the lawns, but there has to be some kind of surface. I also thought, and maybe we could get some clarification on this, that even if you put gravel on your property, it's still not a driveway unless you have a curb cut. So maybe we could check and see what the rules are and see if there's some way we can keep people from paving excessive surfaces through the curb cut issue. So that would be one thing to check. The other thing is the issue about commercial vehicles. I think we're conflating two different issues here. One is a commercial vehicle, and the other is the size of the vehicles. For example...
Remembering my example, size doesn't get you there.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I think people are talking about when people have concerns, some of the concerns are actually about the size of the vehicles, not whether they're commercial or not. For example, there's a neighbor of mine who lives around the corner from me who drives a cab, and he parks his cab out in front of his house. Now, I don't object to his cab, and I haven't heard complaints from anybody else who does, but the cab is exactly the same size as a car would be. It is a car, essentially, except it's painted as a cab. But it is, I assume, a commercial vehicle. And as I said, I haven't heard any complaints about that. So maybe we should be talking about sizes of vehicles rather than commercial vehicles. And maybe we should also be talking about numbers of large vehicles, because certainly there are cases where people have parked 3 or 4 large commercial vehicles in one limited location. It certainly does eliminate the opportunity for other people to park there. But there's also issues, and I have heard complaints about them, of people who have private, non-commercial, but very large vehicles like RVs that I have heard complaints about. And so if we go down this road, we're also going to get involved in that issue. And I'm not sure that we want to. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that maybe if the concern is the amount of space that they take up and the blocking of the view and the noisy, maybe we're talking about size of vehicles rather than whether they're commercial or not. But if we do go down that road, we're going to start having problems with other kinds of trailers and RVs and motorhomes and that kind of thing. So this is not a simple issue. This is a fairly complicated issue.
I agree with you, and I agree with everything you said about the issues, but I don't agree with your solution, which is size. I think the things you itemized, so as far as sight lines and you had 3 that you had mentioned, I think are all accurate. I'm not sure that size of vehicle is a key thing. I think maybe where you park it is the key thing, and how it's shielded from your neighbors.
Okay.
Maybe I can point out that this might be a little bit like the Supreme Court trying to define pornography, and Justice Potter Stewart's comment that I know it when I see it. And I'll just give you one, for instance, of dealing with size. If somebody were to buy for their family vehicle a Ford crew cab pickup with an 8-foot bed, that is 21 foot 10 and a half inches long.
Who would buy that for their family vehicle?
People do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, having determined that this is a very complicated issue, we will not come up with a solution this evening. We can ask for...
We could park it.
For some, yes, we could park it on a future agenda. We could ask if the staff has any illuminating thoughts in addition to the ones they've already given us, but I have a feeling this is not going to be an easy problem to solve. So having spent the time to determine this is a complicated issue, we'll leave it at that and bring it back again.
And one last comment, that is, not everything, of course, has a code solution, or should it have. And it may be that in some of these instances, we might try a less confrontational, combative approach by attempting to do some outreach to individuals or groups of individuals that are causing the most concern among their neighbors, and see if just by simply saying, look, this is a concern, here are some alternatives. You can park 3 of these vehicles that are used for commercial purposes a block away, walk over there, there's a auxiliary road near New Hampshire, or a parking lot someplace else. I mean, I do think that we should probably try a combination of carrot and stick.
Good thought. Ruben?
Yeah, I thank Doug for making that. My comment is I live on Erie Avenue, and there are 5 commercial businesses on Erie Avenue, plus, in addition, in the middle of the street is an organic farmer, my neighbor, who parks his enormous truck every once in a while in his driveway and very occasionally on the street, plus a large pickup that he has as well. I think Doug's idea is the right one, and we've had some success in our neighborhood by just talking to the business owners and just reminding them that they take up a lot of space, or that the neighbors are concerned. And the commercial folks in particular don't really want to alienate potential customers. So unless it's a commercial person whose business is far away, they are pretty responsive, in my opinion. So I think we may think of both soft and hard solutions to this.
Yeah, I have to voice my support of that. I think that's worked in our neighborhood. I think people have been shown an interest in being considerate to their neighbors, and maybe it's a council member is the solution.
Okay, on that positive note, is there anything else?
Just don't drive a commercial vehicle in order to make your mediation.
Anything else? If there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Reminder, again, no council meeting next Monday because it is the first evening of Passover.
I'm sure we'll get an email reminder.
I heard all of your chants, don't wanna hear them again. Suspect everything you do and question everything you say, so you can leave with your lies, 'cause I don't want you to see. It ain't gonna rain no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. I said it ain't gonna rain no more. I better go get to step and got to get out my door, 'cause it ain't gonna rain no more. Go ahead, man. Done wrong. My name is all over town. I think you're playing on me while I am nowhere around. I've been thinking about us, and now I'm hip to your game. But I'm calling from jail because the cops got my name. It ain't gonna rain no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. It ain't gonna Yo, check this. Living at my place, saying need your space. All the while been lying to my face. Girl, you done me wrong, wrong, wrong. I take you by the hand, try to understand, but you've been slipping, dripping, dipping with your other man. And now the love is gone, gone, gone. Can't you see what I do? I'm standing here beside you, and you ain't paid me no mind. You said you wanna come back home. I heard this song once before, no, so I'll be gone this time. Start all over again, make a moving on. Go back where you've been, make a moving on. Can't be like it was back then, just a moving on. Yes, I'm moving on. Just let go, my friends say so. The whole time you've been living on the down low, and I have played your fool. Can't you see what I do? I'm standing here beside you, and you ain't paid me no mind. You said you wanna come back home. I heard this song was before, no, so I'll be gone this time. Start all over again, make a moving on. I better go back where you've been, make a moving on. It can't be like it was back then, just a moving on. Yes, I'm moving on, make a moving on. Start all over again, make a moving on. Go back where you've been, make a moving on. You sell your soul 10 times over, still no one feels like home anymore. Strung out on shame, shot up on fame, all because they wanna be a pop star, a pop star. They say that I'm gonna be a pop star, a pop star, pop star. They make your call, they take it all, and yet you got that look in your eye. Play your fool just to sing your blues, just to make all you need to survive. Now you gotta be a
me tell you how it really is. Members of the congregation, respected brothers and sisters in every nation, evil pastors would have you do otherwise. I think you heard me that time. Lock your hands up, put on disguise, fight the trust, set you free. Do not do what evil would have you do. Make no mistake, pastors bring back tidings. Just examine the readings and the writings. How do you do good? You didn't come on the way. Lock yourself in the store. Brothers and sisters, make no mistake. This afternoon, this evening, tomorrow morning, next week. Say it loud. Say it. Not bad. Somebody done locked that back door. Hey, babe. Somebody done locked that back door. I'd have come through the front, but my key don't fit no more. Hey, babe. Woman, what's wrong with you? Woman, what's wrong with you? I use a hard-headed woman, won't do like I tell you to. Hey, babe, you sure treat your daddy mean. Sure treat your daddy mean. But you the finest little thing my boys ever did see. Don't make your move too fast. Don't you make your move too fast. 'Cause you's a gold digging mama, and where you gonna get your cash from? I said you're a gold digging mama, and where you gonna get your cash?
It's been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming. Feel the glory of love. I yield to none before thee. It's so hard to be a better man. Let your truth set me free. Heaven shed your light home, so my eyes can see that I've got no time to waste. My heart can't take this place. The stories in my face, come take it home with me. It's been a long time, a long time coming. It's been a long time. Time coming. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. No, 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 no. But it's so hard to be the better man. Let your truth set me free. I haven't shed your light home, so my eyes can see that I've got no time to waste. I can't take this place. The stories in my face, come take it all away. It's been a long time, a long time coming. It's been a long time, a long time coming. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. A long time coming. Long time coming. How long, baby, how long has that evening train been gone? How long, baby, how long? I've seen the Venus up on yonder's hill, but I ain't seen a greenback on that dollar bill. So long, baby, so long.
It's been so long, we sing these old blues songs. I tell you just the other day, a couple of things went wrong. Me and my lady disagree, now we can't get along. So I'm hanging out with you to write a new blues song. The passing for the music I was making with you. Can you tell me, Kelly Bell, what's a singing to do? When I'm feeling low down, I keep my music blue. Now Mr. Trumpet player, I wanna hear from you, yeah.
Should I keep my clothes and phone? Well, no. How long? Baby, how long?
Let me say how long.
I like it.
So how long until my shit comes in? All this hard living's got me dealing with sin. Sometimes I can't believe what I get myself in. And what's it gonna take to see this poor man win? Oh, because it's good times and bad times I've had my share. And one thing that we're learning is that life's not fair. You get up off your backside and go somewhere. I say, Kelly Bellman, y'all can pass this year.
I see the green birds up on yonder's hill,
And I wanna call it all day.
but I ain't seen a greenback on that dollar bill. So long, baby, so long. How long, baby, how long has that evening train, sister, been gone? How long? How long? Baby, how long?
What I gotta do to stay strong?
Baby, how long? Looking at the outside from within, trying to feed my mind, but it's gone again. Don't tell me that I'm wrong, man, it's a sin. Looking at the outside from within. Right train, said the left to the right brain, so I get confused. Which do I choose? Yeah, holding out till the end. Gonna be that time again. Handed down from grace, but where is this place? Yeah. Looking at the outside from within, trying to feed my mind, but it's gone again. Don't tell me that I'm wrong, man, it's the same. Looking at the outside from within. Hear the man on the corner, tell me what he got for ya. Pushing jaded views of his capital world. Oh wow, politics to leave me alone, 'cause I can find the light on my home. I don't need your words to tell me who to serve now, that's why I'm looking at the outside from within, trying to feed my mind, but it's gone again. Don't tell me that I'm wrong, man, it's a sin. I'm looking at the outside from within. Looking at the outside from within. my mind, but it's gonna end. Don't tell me that I'm wrong, man, it's a sin. I'm looking at the hot side from within. Looking at the hot side from within. Trying to keep my mind, but it's gonna end. Don't tell me that I'm wrong, man, it's a sin. I'm looking at the hot side from within. Let the last words we say be I love you. Just like the moon, how it seems to conquer the sea. Let the last words we say be I love you. Then you'll know the one who adores you is me. I don't think that I'm gonna see that girl no more. I don't think that I'm gonna see that man no more. It's been a real long time since you walked right on my door. When I heard the preacher holler, I just jumped up and waved my hand. When I heard the preacher holler, I just jumped up and waved my hand. He said the name is all around, Lord. I gotta find me a better man. Oh yeah. The older woman said it was your mama's favorite child. The older woman said it was your mama's favorite child. And that's your wicked evil ways gonna put my soul on trial. I don't think that I'm gonna see that girl no more. See that man no more. I don't think that I'm gonna see that girl no more. It's been a real long time since they walked right down my I've been standing at the station since 15 after 2. I've been standing at the station since about 2:15. Now that my baby left me, the voices come to get me, all my mind is trying to lead me to. Now that my baby left me, all my mind is trying to lead me to. I don't think that I'm gonna see that girl no more. I don't think that I'm gonna see that girl no more. It's been a real long time since you walked right out of my door. before too long. Here we go, talk about the same old thing. There you go, singing that same old song. Yeah, this book about a million times, gotta make my move before too long. Here we go, talk about the same old thing. There you go, singing that same old song. Read this book about a million times, gotta make my move before too long. Here we go, talking about the same old thing. I think I'm moving on, starting all over again. I think I'm moving on. Better go back where you've been. I think I'm moving on. You feel like it was back then. I'm moving on. Yes, I'm moving on. I think I'm moving on.
New beginnings, fresh endings. Too much time I've been spending, wasting. So start facing this. It's me you gon' miss. Don't mean to this. It's just that the truth is cold, lukewarm, like the loving. Don't say nothing. Your bag's packed, but I'm traveling light. I never imagined it would feel so right, like seeing your exit. I stressed it on it for too long, but now I'm clear. It's time to move on, move on, move on.
Hey, moving on. Starting all over again. Think I'm moving on. Go back where you've been. Think I'm moving on. You feel like it was back then. Cause I'm moving on. Yes, I'm moving on. I think I'm moving on.
Requested space, I gave you room. You wanted a star, I gave you the moon. I was in it to win it, but you made me lose. And you be the reason I be singing the blues. And that's one choice that I got to choose. One thing to do, and that's to make moves. So I'm home alone, sitting by the phone. You call me up, said you get a down tone. Move on with your life. Never ever will you be husband and wife. See, you brought me too much strife. Baby dear, it's been nice.
I gotta be moving on. Starting all over again. I think I'm moving on. I gotta be moving on. Better go back where you've been. I think I'm moving on. I can't be like it was back then. Cause I'm moving on. Yes, I'm moving on.
Are you one of the millions of Americans suffering from one or more of the following afflictions? Back pain, headache, gingivitis, hip dysplasia. Are you overweight? Scabies, thick plaque in your teeth? Are you finding it hard to get up? Are you finding it hard to get down? Cooties, deodorant chunks under your arms, anal warts, rabies, projectile diarrhea, hypergonosyphilades. Are you a bitch? Halitosis, the weird disease that Gary Coleman had. Crabs, burning sensation when you urinate, acromegaly, jerker's cramp. Are you still living in your mom's basement? Eye boogers? Do you live in a one-bedroom apartment but drive a $65,000 vehicle? Lumps when you pee? When you use a Q-tip, does it come out looking like a sugar daddy? Gingivitis? If so, then you may be a prime candidate for Fat Blues Music. Let's listen to a testimonial from an actual Fat Blues Music listener.
My name's Cletus Blount, and I'm a truck driving man. I'm on my ass about 15 to 16 hours a day. My ass takes a beat. I got ingrown hairs, pimples, warts, piles, and shingles. You name it, I got it on my butt. I started developing symptoms of massive hemorrhoid dysplasia. Maybe you've never heard of it. It's a rare disease that strikes 1 in every 25,000 truck driving men. Nothing seemed to work until I heard Fat Blues music. Thanks to Fat Blues music, I was able to quit my job and get a job dancing in honky-tonks, exotic dancing. Now I sling my banana hammock from dusk till dawn, baby, and my life is 100% better. Well, I even met myself a little Billy. Hell, thanks to Fat Blues music, even I'm more open-minded now. I even have 2 black friends, and they're both Kelly Baker.
Thank you, Cletus. As you can see from that amazing testimonial, it's not just fat, it's not just blues, it's Fat Blues Music. Some side effects may occur, including extreme elation, singing gleefully, euphoria, uncontrollable dancing, multiple orgasm, happiness, neck pain from hours of head bobbing, pregnancy, perspiration, sore throat, co-ed naked twister, and in some situations, togetherness and open-mindedness.
I'm going to the valley where I can get some peace. Going to the valley where I can get some peace. I just want to be alone. Don't you try, don't you try, don't you try to follow me. You can't keep up with I've packed all my things, I wear them on my back. I packed all my things, they're heavy on my back. Pray I do not trip and fall. I can't see, I can't see, I can't see the road I'm on. You can't tell where I am, can't tell where I am. A bee flies with me, keep buzzing round my head. A bee flies with me, keep buzzing round my head. I can't get him from my face. It's just for me. Nobody but me. I'm going to the valley where I can get some peace. Going to the valley where I can get some peace. I just want to be all one. I gotta be all one. Don't you cry, don't you cry. Don't you cry a tear for me. Keep your tears for yourself. Save your tears for yourself. Don't you cry for me. I'm going to the valley where I can get get some peace.